This time Cole wasn't bleeding. He stood on her step, clean-shaven, hair combed back, holding his hat in both hands like a man who'd been raised with manners and forgotten them for a while. "Morning," he said. Clara crossed her arms. "Thought you died." "Almost did. Took me 2 days to ride home." He shifted his weight, awkward. "I came to say thank you and to pay you back." "Don't need paying back. I'm not a charity case. Didn't say you were. But if you think I charge strangers for helping them, you don't know me very well." Cole's jaw tightened. "I don't know you at all." "Then we're even." They stood there for a moment, Clara on one side of the doorway, Cole on the other, both of them stubborn and bruised in their own ways. Finally, Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded bill. More money than 3 nights' lodging and stitches would cost, even if she'd been charging. "Take it," he said quietly. "Please." Clara looked at the money, then at his face. There was something raw in his expression, something that went beyond pride. This wasn't about paying a debt. It was about not being seen as weak, as needing help he couldn't return. She understood that better than she wanted to. She took the money. "Thank you," she said. Cole nodded, put his hat on, turned to leave. "Wait," Clara said, surprising herself. "Have you eaten?" He stopped. "What?" "Breakfast. Have you had any?" "Not yet. Come in. I've got fresh bread and coffee." For a long moment, Cole just stared at her like she'd spoken a language he didn't understand. Then slowly, he stepped inside. They didn't talk much that first morning. Clara set out bread, butter, and coffee so strong it could strip paint. Cole ate methodically, like a man who'd forgotten what a real meal felt like, and Clara busied herself with prep work, anything to avoid the strangeness of having someone in her space at this hour. The bakery was hers. The solitude was hers. Sharing it felt like handing over something she hadn't known she was guarding, but Cole didn't intrude. He finished eating, rinsed his plate in the basin without being asked, and stood by the door like he was waiting for permission to leave. "You can come back," Clara said, not looking at him. "If you want. Same time." "Why?" "Because nobody should eat alone every damn day." She felt his eyes on her, weighing the offer, looking for the catch. When she finally glanced up, his expression had softened into something almost vulnerable. "All right," he said. "Tomorrow then." And he kept his word. Cole Maddox showed up every morning for the next 2 weeks. Same time, same quiet presence. He never said much, wasn't built for small talk, but he listened when Clara spoke, which was rarer than it should have been. Most folks talked at her, not to her. They ordered bread, paid, left. Cole stayed. He asked about her oven, about flour suppliers, about the leak in her roof she still hadn't fixed. Small things. Things that suggested he saw the bakery as more than just a place to get food. On the 3rd week, he brought tools. "Thought I'd take a look at that roof," he said, already halfway up her ladder before Clara could protest. "You don't have to." "I know." He spent 2 hours patching shingles, replacing rotten boards, working with the kind of focused intensity that made Clara wonder when he'd last had a project that wasn't his own survival. When he climbed down, there was satisfaction in his face. Quiet, but real. "Should hold through a winter now," Cole said, wiping tar off his hands. Clara poured him coffee. "What do I owe you?" "Nothing. We're even." "We've been even since you paid me back." Cole took the coffee, looked at her over the rim of the cup. "Then maybe I just wanted to fix your roof." It was such a simple statement, but it landed in Clara's chest like something heavy and warm. She couldn't remember the last time someone had done something for her just because they wanted to, not because she'd asked, not because they owed her, just because. "Thank you," she said quietly. Cole nodded and drank his coffee, and they stood there in comfortable silence while the morning sun slanted through the windows, turning the bakery golden. That's when Iris Calloway walked in. She stopped dead in the doorway, eyes darting between Clara and Cole, taking in the scene with the speed and accuracy of a woman who lived for gossip. Clara saw the exact moment Iris's brain started spinning, saw the story forming before a word was spoken. "Morning, Iris," Clara said evenly. "Clara, Mr. Maddox." Iris's smile was sharp. "Didn't expect to see you two together." "Cole fixed my roof." "How neighborly." Iris's tone suggested it was anything but. She bought her bread quickly and left, glancing back twice before she disappeared down the street. Cole set his cup down. That's going to be a problem. It's none of her business. People like her make everything their business. Clara wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. By noon, half the town would know Cole Maddox had been at her bakery at dawn. By evening, they'd have invented reasons why. And none of those reasons would be kind to Clara, not because of Cole, but because of her. Women like Clara didn't get romantic attention. They got pity, mockery, or indifference. The idea that a man like Cole Maddox, younger, handsome in a weather-beaten way, owner of a big ranch, would be interested in her, the town would laugh. Or worse, they'd assume he was using her for something. I should go, Cole said, reading her silence. You don't have to. Yeah, I do. He picked up his hat, hesitated. Clara. It's fine, really. But it wasn't fine, and they both knew it. Cole left, and Clara went back to work, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in her chest that felt suspiciously like loss. The gossip started that afternoon. Clara heard it in fragments, customers whispering to each other, falling silent when she came near, then picking it up again the moment she turned away. She caught words like desperate and fool and her age. Each one was a small, precise cut, the kind that didn't bleed but left scars anyway. By the time she closed up shop, Clara felt raw. She climbed the stairs to her small apartment and sat by the window looking out at the street below. Three Pines in the evening light looked almost pretty. Soft edges, long shadows, people moving through their routines with the ease of belonging. Clara had lived here for 23 years and never felt like she belonged. Not really. She'd come to Three Pines at 20 after her mother died and left her nothing but the bakery and a lifetime of lessons on how to survive without being loved. Clara had learned those lessons well. She kept her head down, did her work, didn't ask for more than she could earn. And it had been enough, lonely, but enough. Until Cole Maddox stumbled through her door, bleeding and desperate, and reminded her what it felt like to be seen. Now she didn't know which was worse, the years of invisibility or the brief, bright shock of being noticed, only to have it snatched away by people who couldn't imagine she deserved it. A knock at her door broke through the spiral. Clara stood, wiped her eyes. She hadn't realized she was crying, and opened the door. Cole stood in the hallway, hat in hand again, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I know I said I'd stay away, he started. Then why are you here? Because staying away felt like letting them win. Clara stared at him. Win what? The right to decide who I spend time with. Cole stepped closer, and Clara could see the anger in his face. Not at her, but at the town, at the people who thought they could dictate the terms of his life. I don't give a damn what Iris Calloway thinks, or anyone else. You should. This town will make your life hell. My life's been hell for 2 years. I'm used to it. Cole, do you want me to stop coming around? He asked it bluntly, no cushion, just the raw question. Because if you do, I will. But don't make that choice because of them. Make it because of you. Clara felt something crack open inside her. Some old, scarred-over place she'd thought was dead. She looked at Cole, really looked, and saw a man who'd lost as much as she had, maybe more, and was still standing, still fighting, still willing to risk what little he had left for something as simple and complicated as connection. I don't want you to stop, she said quietly. Cole's shoulders dropped, tension bleeding out. Good. Neither do I. But it's going to get worse before it gets better. I know. They're going to say terrible things about me. They already are. And they're wrong. Clara's throat tightened. How do you know? Cole looked at her with those sharp gray eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was gentler than she'd ever heard it. Because I see you, Clara. The real you. Not the version they made up to make themselves feel better. It was the first time anyone had said something like that to her. The first time anyone had looked past the surface, the age, the body, the plain face, and seen the woman underneath. And it hurt, sharp and sweet, because Clara hadn't known how much she needed to hear it until the words were already out. Stay for dinner, she said, before she could talk herself out of it. Cole smiled, small but genuine. All right. They ate beef stew and bread at Clara's tiny kitchen table, and for the first time in years, her apartment didn't feel empty. They talked about small things, horses, weather, the ranch, and bigger things too. Cole told her about losing his wife to fever 2 years back, about how the ranch had fallen apart without her, about the bone-deep exhaustion of trying to hold on to something that wanted to slip through your fingers. Clara told him about her mother, about inheriting a business and a legacy of silence, about the slow, grinding loneliness of being useful but never wanted. "You ever think about leaving?" Cole asked. "Every day? But where would I go?" "Anywhere. Anywhere costs money. And courage. I've got one, not the other." Cole leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I think you're braver than you know." Clara laughed, bitter. "I'm a 43-year-old baker who's never been further than 50 miles from where she was born. You opened your door for a bleeding stranger at dawn. You stitched him up without asking questions. You're feeding him dinner right now, even though you know it'll make your life harder." Cole's voice was quiet, steady. "That's brave, Clara. Don't let anyone tell you different." Tears pricked Clara's eyes, and she looked away, embarrassed. She wasn't used to this, being seen, being valued. It felt too big, too fragile, like something that would shatter if she breathed wrong. Cole reached across the table and covered her hand with his. His palm was rough, calloused, warm. "I'm glad I knocked on your door," he said. Clara looked up, met his eyes, and felt something shift between them, something that had been building since that first morning, quiet and inevitable. "So am I," she whispered. "Not." The next 3 weeks were the best and worst of Clara's life. Cole kept coming by, and they stopped pretending it was just about coffee or repairs. They talked for hours, worked side by side, shared meals. Slowly, carefully, they built something neither of them had a name for yet, something more than friendship, but not quite spoken aloud. And the town noticed. Oh, they noticed. Iris Calloway led the charge, spreading rumors with the efficiency of a prairie fire. Clara heard them all, either secondhand or whispered loud enough for her to catch. Cole was using her for free food. Cole felt sorry for her. Cole was trying to get access to her property for some scheme involving Victor Hale's land grab. The theories got more elaborate and cruel as the weeks went on, but the core message was always the same. Men like Cole Maddox didn't want women like Clara Boone unless something was wrong. Clara tried to ignore it. But ignoring gossip in a town the size of Three Pines was like ignoring a bullet wound. It festered. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning. Clara was serving customers when Iris walked in with 2 of her friends, Margaret Wells and Louise Tanner, both respectable ranch wives with too much time and too little kindness. They stood at the counter, not bothering to lower their voices. "I heard he's there every morning now," Margaret said, eyebrows raised. "Every single one," Iris confirmed. "Before dawn, stays for hours." Louise snorted. What could they possibly be doing for hours? The implication hung in the air, ugly and obvious. Clara's hand stilled on the bread she was wrapping. "Maybe he feels sorry for her," Margaret continued. "You know how men get sometimes. Misplaced charity." "Or maybe she's paying him," Louise said, and they all laughed. Clara set the bread down carefully, turned to face them. "If you've got something to say it to me." Iris blinked, feigning innocence. "We weren't talking to you, dear." "You were talking about me, in my shop, while I'm standing right here." "Well, if you're going to carry on with a man young enough to be—" "To be what?" Clara interrupted, her voice sharp. "Your son. He's 36, I'm 43. That's 7 years, not a generation." Margaret's smile turned nasty. "Even so, Clara, you have to understand how it looks." "How it looks," Clara repeated slowly, "is none of your damn business." The shop went silent. Every customer stopped moving, stopped talking, stopped breathing. Clara Boone didn't swear. Clara Boone didn't raise her voice. Clara Boone was polite and deferential and invisible. Iris recovered first, drawing herself up with righteous indignation. "There's no need for that language. We're just concerned." "You're not concerned. You're bored and cruel. And you can take your bread and your gossip somewhere else." Clara pointed at the door. "Get out." For a moment, no one moved. Then Iris turned on her heel and marched out, Margaret and Louise scrambling after her. The door slammed, the bell chiming violently. Clara stood behind her counter, shaking, aware of every eye in the shop fixed on her. Anyone else have concerns about my personal life? She asked, voice still sharp. Silence. Good. Then let's get back to business. Customers paid quickly and left. By closing time, Clara was alone, the shop echoing and empty. She locked the door, leaned her forehead against the cool glass, and tried not to cry. She'd just burned every bridge she had in this town. For what? For a man who'd probably disappear the moment things got too hard, leaving her worse off than before. The knock came just as she'd convinced herself of that. Clara opened the door, expecting Cole. Instead, she found Sheriff Daniels, a lean, gray-haired man who'd kept the peace in Three Pines for 15 years. Evening, Clara. Sheriff? Something wrong? Can I come in? Clara stepped aside, heart pounding. Daniels walked in, glanced around the empty shop, then turned to face her. I heard about what happened this morning, he said. Gossip travels fast. It does. I also heard you threw Iris Calloway out of your shop. Clara lifted her chin. I did. Daniels nodded slowly. Good. Clara blinked. What? Iris Calloway's been making people miserable in this town for 20 years. Someone needed to tell her where to shove it. He almost smiled. Wish I'd been here to see it. Relief flooded through Clara so fast she felt dizzy. Then why are you here? Daniel's expression turned serious. Because you need to know what you're getting into. Cole Maddox is a good man, but he's got enemies. Victor Hale's been trying to buy him out for months, and Cole won't sell. That fight at the saloon wasn't random. Hale's men were there to intimidate him. Clara remembered the blood, the bruises, the boot print on Cole's ribs. Did it work? What do you think? Clara thought about the man who'd fixed her roof, who'd sat at her table and told her she was brave, who'd kept showing up even when the whole town talked. No, she said quietly. That's right. But Hale's not done. And if he thinks Cole cares about you, he'll use that. Do you understand? Clara understood. She also understood that walking away now wouldn't make her safer, just lonelier. I understand, she said. Daniel studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right. Just wanted you to know what's coming. He left, and Clara locked the door behind him. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, sat by the window, and waited. Cole showed up an hour later. He didn't knock, just appeared in the doorway like he'd used the back stairs. His face was tight, angry, and Clara knew he'd heard. They had no right, he said without preamble. They did it anyway. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not. Clara stood, crossed the room to stand in front of him. I'm tired of pretending I don't care what they think when I do, and I'm tired of letting them make me feel like I'm not allowed to. She stopped, the words catching in her throat. Allowed to what? Cole asked gently. To want this, Clara whispered. Whatever this is. Cole's expression softened. He reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in one rough palm. Then stop pretending, he said. Be honest, with them, with me, with yourself. Clara leaned into his touch, feeling the warmth of his skin, the steadiness of his presence. She'd spent so long building walls, convincing herself she didn't need anyone, that this kind of connection was for other people, younger people, prettier people. But Cole was looking at her like she was all of those things and more. I want this, Clara said, the words raw and true. I want you. Cole's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, gentle and deliberate. Then you have me. He kissed her. It wasn't like the stories Clara had read as a girl, all passion and fireworks. It was slower than that, careful. A question and an answer and a promise, all at once. Cole's mouth was warm, his hand steady on her face, and Clara felt something inside her unclench, some part of her that had been braced for rejection, for mockery, for proof that this was all a mistake. But it wasn't a mistake. When they pulled apart, Cole rested his forehead against hers. We're going to catch hell for this, he murmured. Clara laughed, shaky but real. We already are. Then we might as well make it worth it. They stood there in her small apartment, holding each other while the town outside buzzed with judgment and speculation, and Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Dangerous, fragile, impossible hope, but real. The next morning, Cole walked Clara to the bakery at dawn. in full view of anyone who cared to look. He didn't try to hide, didn't hurry, just walked beside her like it was the most natural thing in the world, and when they reached her door, he kissed her goodbye on the step where anyone passing could see. "Let them talk," he said. Clara nodded, throat tight with something that felt like courage. Cole left, and Clara opened her shop, prepared for an empty day. Instead, she got 4 customers before noon, none of them Iris Calloway or her friends, but people Clara barely knew. Ranchers from the North Valley, a widow named Anne who'd always been kind, a young couple new to town. They bought bread, they paid, and they didn't whisper. It was a small thing, a tiny shift, but Clara felt it like sunlight breaking through clouds. Not everyone in Three Pines was cruel. Not everyone judged. Some people just wanted bread, and some people saw past the gossip to the truth underneath. 2 lonely people finding each other in a hard world, trying to build something good. Clara held on to that as the day stretched on, as the town slowly divided itself into camps, those who mocked and those who didn't care. And when Cole came back that evening, bringing fresh venison and a quiet smile, Clara let him in without hesitation. They cooked together, ate together, sat by her small fireplace and talked until the embers burned low. Cole told her about the ranch, about the plans he'd had before his wife died, about the slow, painful process of learning to live again. Clara told him about the years of silence, the weight of invisibility, the strange, terrifying relief of finally being seen. "I didn't think I'd get this," she admitted. "Not at my age. Not looking like I do." Cole turned to her, his expression fierce. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Apologize for existing. You're here, Clara. You're real. And you're exactly what I need." Clara's eyes burned. "How do you know?" "Because I was drowning, and you pulled me out." Cole took her hand, laced their fingers together. "I don't care what anyone else thinks. You saved me, and I'm not letting go." Clara believed him, and for the first time in her life, she believed in herself too. The first real test came on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after Cole kissed Clara on her doorstep for the whole town to see. She was closing up shop when she noticed the crowd gathered outside the saloon across the street. Not unusual. Men drank, men argued, men made noise. But something about this felt different. The energy was wrong, tight and expectant, like a rope about to snap. Clara locked her door and started toward home, keeping her head down. She'd learned that lesson early. Don't look, don't engage, don't give them a reason to notice you. But someone called her name anyway. "Clara Boone." She stopped, turned. A man she didn't recognize stepped out of the crowd, tall, well-dressed, too clean for ranch work. His smile was all teeth and no warmth. "You're Clara Boone, Mug?" he asked, though he clearly already knew. "I am." "Name's Porter. I work for Mr. Victor Hale." He said it like she should be impressed. "Mr. Hale would like a word with you." Clara's stomach dropped. Everyone knew Victor Hale, even if they'd never met him. He owned half the valley, wanted the other half, and didn't take no for an answer. Men like him didn't talk to women like Clara unless they wanted something. "About what?" she asked. "About your friend, Mr. Maddox." The crowd had gone quiet now, watching. Clara felt their eyes on her like physical weight. "Cole's business is his own," she said carefully. Porter's smile widened. "That's where you're wrong. See, Mr. Maddox owes Mr. Hale a considerable sum, back taxes on water rights, penalties for missed payments. He's been avoiding the conversation, but we thought maybe you could help facilitate." "I don't know anything about Cole's finances." "No?" Porter stepped closer. "Word is you two are quite close. Surely he's mentioned his difficulties." Clara's hands curled into fists. "Whatever Cole owes, it's between him and Hale. I've got nothing to do with it." "Maybe not yet. But Mr. Hale thought you should know. If Mr. Maddox doesn't settle his debt soon, there will be consequences. For him, for his ranch." Porter paused, let the threat hang in the air. "For anyone associated with him." The message was clear. Back off, or get hurt. Clara looked at Porter, really looked, and saw exactly what he was. A bully in expensive clothes, used to scaring people into compliance. She dealt with bullies her whole life. They were all the same. They picked on people they thought were weak, people who wouldn't fight back. Porter had made a mistake coming after her in public, because if Clara backed down now, she'd prove everything the town had been whispering, that she was desperate, that she was weak, that she wasn't worth the trouble. "You can tell Victor Hale that I don't scare easy," Clara said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "And neither does Cole Maddox. If Hale wants to threaten someone, he can do it to our faces instead of sending lackeys." Porter's smile vanished. "Careful, Miss Boone. You don't want to make an enemy of Mr. Hale." "I think I just did." Porter stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked away. The crowd dispersed slowly, murmuring, glancing back at Clara like they couldn't quite believe what they'd just witnessed. Clara stood alone in the street, heart hammering, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. She'd just painted a target on her own back. For what? Pride? Stubbornness? No. For Cole, because he'd stood beside her when no one else would, and she'd be damned if she let him face Hale alone. She went to find him. Cole's ranch was an hour's ride north, but Clara didn't own a horse. She borrowed one from Anne, the widow who'd been kind, and rode out as the sun started setting. By the time she reached the Maddox place, her thighs were screaming and her hands were blistered, but she didn't care. The ranch looked worse than she'd imagined. Fences sagging, barn in need of repair, fields overgrown. A place that had once been prosperous and was now barely holding on. Cole was in the corral working with a young stallion, moving with the kind of patience that came from years of practice. He saw her coming and stopped, surprise flickering across his face. "Clara?" She dismounted gracelessly, nearly fell, caught herself on the fence rail. "We need to talk." Cole tied off the stallion and climbed out of the corral. Up close, Clara could see the exhaustion carved into his face, new lines, darker circles under his eyes. He'd been carrying this alone for too long. "What happened?" he asked. Clara told him. About Porter, about Hale's threat, about her own reckless mouth getting her into trouble. Cole listened without interrupting, but his jaw got tighter with every word. "You shouldn't have done that," he said when she finished. "Probably not." "Hale's dangerous, Clara. You don't understand what you just—" "I understand perfectly." Clara stepped closer, forced him to look at her. "He threatened you. That means he threatened me. I'm not going to stand by and let him bully you into giving up everything you've built. Everything I've built is falling apart anyway." Cole's voice was bitter. "The ranch is drowning in debt. I can't afford to pay the hands. Half the herd's gone. Hale knows it. He's just waiting for me to break so he can buy the land for nothing." "Then don't break." "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is. You fight. You hold on. You don't let men like Hale win." Cole laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think I haven't been fighting? I've been fighting for 2 years, Clara. I'm tired." "Then let me help." "How? You gonna pay off my debts with bread money?" It was a cruel thing to say, and Clara flinched. Cole saw it immediately, his face crumpling with regret. "Christ, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." Clara's voice was steady despite the hurt. "You meant it. Because you're scared and angry, and you don't know how to let anyone in when you're like this." Cole looked away, shoulders slumping. "You should go. Before Hale decides you're worth targeting, too." "I'm not going anywhere." "Clara, no. Listen to me." Clara grabbed his arm, made him face her. "I spent 43 years being invisible because it was safer than being seen. Then you showed up and saw me anyway. You think I'm going to walk away now just because things got hard?" Cole's eyes were wet. "You don't owe me anything." "This isn't about owing. It's about choosing. I'm choosing you, Cole. I'm choosing us. And if that means standing up to Victor Hale, then that's what I'll do." For a long moment, Cole just stared at her. Then he pulled her into his arms, held her so tight Clara could barely breathe. She felt him shaking, rage or fear or relief, maybe all three. "I don't know how to beat him," Cole whispered against her hair. "We'll figure it out, together." They stood there in the fading light, two people who'd been alone too long, holding on to each other like the world was trying to tear them apart. And maybe it was. But Clara had spent her whole life bending to pressure, hiding from conflict, making herself small. Not anymore. When Cole finally pulled back, his face was set with determination. "All right, if we're doing this, we're doing it right. I need to know exactly what I owe and what leverage Hale thinks he has. And we need allies." "Who?" "Other ranchers, the ones Hale's been pressuring. If we stand together, we're harder to pick off one by one." Clara nodded. "I know some of them. They buy from me. I can talk to them." "It might not work. They might be too scared to help. Then we'll find another way. Cole smiled, small but genuine. You're stubborn, you know that? Takes one to know one. He kissed her then, quick and fierce, and Clara tasted desperation and hope in equal measure. They spent the next 3 hours going through Cole's books by lamplight in his kitchen. The numbers were worse than Clara had expected. Cole owed money to the bank, to the county for water rights, to suppliers he hadn't been able to pay. Hale had been systematically buying up those debts, positioning himself to foreclose the moment Cole missed a payment. He's been planning this for months, Clara said, staring at the papers spread across the table. Longer, since Ellen died. Cole's voice was flat. He made an offer a week after the funeral. Said he'd help me out of kindness. I told him to go to hell. You think that's why he's pushing now? I know it is. Hale doesn't like being told no. Clara studied Cole's face, the stubborn set of his jaw, the pride that wouldn't let him bend even when breaking might be easier. She understood that pride. She'd built her whole life on it. How much time do we have? She asked. 2 months? Maybe less if he accelerates. Then we use every day. Clara stayed that night, not because anything happened between them beyond planning and worry, but because leaving felt wrong. They fell asleep at the kitchen table, heads pillowed on their arms, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. When Clara woke at dawn, Cole was watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. Morning, he said quietly. Morning. You snore. Clara laughed, surprised. I do not. You do. It's cute. Nothing about me is cute. Cole reached across the table, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Everything about you is. Clara felt her face heat, felt the old instinct to deflect, to make a joke, to dismiss the compliment before it could settle too deep. But she stopped herself. Let the words land. Let herself believe them, just for a moment. We should get back to town, she said instead, before people start talking. People are already talking. Then let's give them something real to talk about. They rode back together in the early light, Clara on the borrowed horse and Cole on his own. When they reached Three Pines, Cole didn't leave her at the edge of town like discretion would suggest. He rode straight up to her bakery, helped her dismount, and kissed her goodbye where anyone could see. Tonight? He asked. Tonight. He rode off, and Clara went inside to start her day. She had bread to bake, and a town to face, and a war to prepare for. But first, she had to open her shop and pretend everything was normal. It lasted until 10 o'clock. That's when Iris Calloway walked in with 3 other women Clara didn't recognize, ranch wives from the look of them, dressed nice and wearing identical expressions of judgment. Clara, Iris said, her voice dripping false sweetness. We need to talk. Clara set down the loaf she was wrapping. About? About your relationship with Mr. Maddox, and what it means for this town. My relationship is my business, not when it affects all of us. One of the other women stepped forward, older, severe-looking, with the air of someone used to being obeyed. Victor Hale has been good to Three Pines. He employs half the men here. He donates to the church, the school. When he wants something, we listen. Clara's stomach sank. Let me guess. He wants Cole's land. He wants Mr. Maddox to be reasonable, to accept a fair offer and move on before things get ugly. And you think I can convince Cole to sell? We think you have influence over him. Iris leaned on the counter, her smile sharp. A woman like you must know how rare this is. A man like Cole Maddox showing interest. Surely you don't want to risk losing that by encouraging him to fight a battle he can't win. The implication was clear and cruel. Know your place. Take what you can get. Don't reach for more than you deserve. Clara felt rage building in her chest, hot and righteous. But she kept her voice level. Cole's not fighting because of me. He's fighting because Hale's trying to steal his land. Steal? The severe woman laughed. Mr. Hale is offering more than that property is worth. If that were true, Cole would have sold already. Then he's a fool, and you're a bigger one for supporting him. Clara walked out from behind the counter, stood directly in front of the 4 women. They were all taller than her, better dressed, more conventionally attractive. But Clara didn't care anymore. She was done shrinking. Get out of my shop, she said quietly. Iris blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. Get out. All of you. Now, Clara, there's no need. There is a need. You came here to intimidate me, to make me feel small and grateful for scraps. Well, I'm not small, and I'm not grateful, and I'm not interested in anything Victor Hale has to say. Clara pointed at the door. So leave. Now. The severe woman drew herself up, outraged. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. They left in a huff, and Clara locked the door behind them. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline and fury, and something that felt dangerously close to power. She'd just made an enemy of Victor Hale's people. There was no going back now. The rest of the day passed in tense quiet. Customers came, fewer than usual, but enough, and Clara served them without comment. By closing time, she was exhausted, wrung out from tension and worry. Cole showed up at 6 with Sheriff Daniels. We need to talk, Daniels said without preamble. Clara let them in, locked the door. The three of them sat at her table in the back room, and Daniels pulled out a notebook. Tell me everything Hale's people have said to you, he said. Clara recounted it. Porter's threat, the women's visit, all of it. Daniels wrote it down, his face growing darker with each detail. Hale's escalating, he said when she finished. He usually waits longer before getting this direct. Why the rush? Clara asked. Because other ranchers are starting to organize. 3 of them came to my office yesterday asking about their legal rights. If they band together, Hale loses his leverage. Daniels looked at Cole. This is your doing? Clara's, actually. Daniels raised an eyebrow, glanced at Clara with something that might have been respect. You've been busy. I asked around, talked to some people I know. Clara shrugged. Turns out a lot of folks are tired of Hale pushing them around. They just needed someone to say it out loud. That's dangerous, Clara. You understand that? I understand. Good, because it's about to get worse. Daniels closed his notebook. Hale's got the money and the connections to make your lives hell. Legal hell, social hell, economic hell. And if that doesn't work, he's not above other methods. What kind of methods? Clara asked. The kind that involve his men showing up at night. The kind that involve accidents and fires and people getting hurt. Cole's jaw tightened. Then we go to the marshal, get federal involvement. The marshal's office is 3 days' ride, and they won't come unless there's proof of a crime. Right now, all we've got is intimidation and implied threats. That's not enough. So what do we do? Daniel stood, looked between them. You watch your backs. You don't go anywhere alone. And you start documenting everything, every threat, every encounter, every piece of pressure Hale applies. Build a case. Make it ironclad. Then maybe the marshal will listen. He left, and Cole and Clara sat in heavy silence. You can still walk away, Cole said finally. This isn't your fight. It is now. Clara, stop. Just stop. She reached across the table, took his hand. I know what I'm getting into. I'm not some naive girl who thinks love conquers all. I'm a grown woman who's choosing to stand beside you because it's the right thing to do, and because... She hesitated, then pushed forward. Because I love you. It was the first time either of them had said it out loud. The words hung between them, fragile and enormous. Cole's grip on her hand tightened. I love you too. That's why I'm terrified. If something happens to you because of me, then we'll deal with it, together. He pulled her into his lap, held her close, and Clara felt the tremor in his body, fear and love and desperate hope all tangled together. We're going to survive this, she whispered against his neck. How do you know? Because neither of us knows how to quit. Cole laughed, shaky but real, and Clara held him tighter. They spent that night planning. Cole would talk to the other ranchers, see who was willing to stand with them. Clara would keep her ear to the ground in town, document everything she heard. And they'd both be careful, watchful, ready for whatever Hale threw at them next. It came 3 days later. Clara was in the bakery before dawn when she smelled smoke. Not wood smoke from her oven, something else, sharper, closer. She ran to the window and saw flames licking up the side of the feed store next door. She grabbed buckets, started hauling water from the pump in the street. Within minutes, other people emerged. Anne, old Mr. Patterson from the smithy, a handful of men from the saloon. They formed a chain, passing buckets, dousing the flames before they could spread. By the time they got it under control, the feed store's side wall was charred black, and the owner, a quiet man named Dutch, was standing in the street looking shell-shocked. "How'd it start?" someone asked. Dutch shook his head. "I don't know. I was asleep. I heard breaking glass, then flames." Sheriff Daniels arrived, examined the scene, found broken glass and the smell of kerosene. "This was arson," he said flatly. The crowd went silent. "Who'd want to burn Dutch out?" Anne asked. But Clara knew. She looked across the street and saw Porter standing in the shadows, watching. Their eyes met, and he smiled before disappearing into an alley. Message received. Back off, or next time it wouldn't be an empty feed store. Clara's hands curled into fists. Cole found her an hour later, still covered in soot, staring at the burned wall. "I heard," he said. "This is because of us." "No, this is because of Hale. Don't let him twist this into something it's not. Dutch could have died. But he didn't." Cole turned her to face him. "This is what Hale does. He scares people until they give up. But we're not going to give up, are we?" Clara looked at him, at the determination in his face, the refusal to bend, and felt her own resolve harden. "No," she said. "We're not." But that night, lying alone in her bed, Clara let herself feel the fear she'd been holding back. Hale was escalating, people were getting hurt, and it was only going to get worse before it got better. She thought about walking away, about ending things with Cole before someone died. It would be easier, safer. But the thought of going back to invisibility, to the quiet, lonely life she'd lived before, that was worse than any threat Hale could make. So Clara made her choice. She got out of bed, lit a lamp, and started writing. Every threat, every encounter, every detail she could remember. If they were going to fight Hale, they needed evidence. And if she was going to risk everything, she was damn well going to make it count. By dawn, she had 5 pages filled with names, dates, and conversations. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Cole came by as she was opening the shop, took one look at the pages spread across her counter, and smiled. "You're amazing, you know that?" Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. "I'm stubborn." "Same thing." He kissed her, gentle and lingering, and Clara let herself believe, just for a moment, that they might actually win this fight. Then the door opened, and 3 of Cole's neighboring ranchers walked in. They looked grim, determined, and ready for a fight. "We're in," the first one said. "Whatever you need. We're in." Clara looked at Cole, saw hope flare in his face, and felt something shift. They weren't alone anymore. Hale had pushed too hard, scared too many people, and now those people were pushing back. "Then let's get to work," Cole said. And they did. Over the next 2 weeks, Clara's bakery became something it had never been before, a gathering place. The 3 ranchers who'd walked through her door that morning brought others. By the end of the first week, 7 families had signed on to stand against Hale. By the end of the second, it was 12. They met after dark, crowding into Clara's back room with the shades drawn and voices kept low. Most were men, weathered, hard-handed, suspicious of outsiders, but united by a common enemy. A few brought their wives, women who sat quiet but watchful, taking measure of Clara in ways that made her skin prickle. Cole led most of the meetings, laying out what they knew about Hale's tactics and what they could do to counter them. But it was Clara who kept the records, who made sure every accusation was documented, every threat written down with dates and witnesses. Her handwriting filled notebook after notebook, cramped and precise. "You're good at this," Anne whispered one night, watching Clara add another entry. "Good at what?" "Organizing, keeping track. Most people panic when things get complicated." Clara shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Someone has to do it." "Yeah, but you're doing it well. These men listened to you." Clara glanced at the room full of ranchers, saw them nodding as Cole spoke, saw them glancing her way when decisions needed to be made. Anne was right. Somewhere along the way, without Clara quite noticing, she'd become essential to this fight. Not because she was loud or commanding, but because she was steady, reliable. The kind of person who showed up and did the work without needing recognition. It was strange, being needed. Clara had spent so long being overlooked that she'd forgotten what it felt like to matter. The fragile coalition they'd built held for exactly 11 days before Hale struck back. It happened at dawn on a Saturday. Clara was pulling the first batch of bread from her oven when she heard shouting in the street. She ran to the window and saw smoke rising from the north end of town, thick, black, too much for a chimney fire. Her heart dropped. No. She grabbed her shawl and ran outside. Half the town was already moving toward the smoke, and Clara pushed through the crowd until she could see what was burning. The livery stable. Fully engulfed, flames roaring through the roof, horses screaming inside. Men were trying to get the animals out, but the heat was too intense. Clara saw John Mercer, one of the ranchers who'd joined their group, stumble back from the entrance, his shirt smoking, his face twisted with rage and grief. "They locked the doors," he shouted. "Someone locked the goddamn doors from outside." The crowd surged forward, buckets appearing from nowhere. But it was already too late. The stable was lost. All they could do was keep the fire from spreading to the buildings on either side. Clara found Cole in the chaos, soot-streaked and breathing hard. "How many horses?" 8. Mercer lost 4. The others belonged to people staying at the hotel. "Anyone hurt?" "Not yet." Cole's jaw was tight. But this was a message. Mercer was the first one to stand with us publicly. Now he's lost half his stock. Clara felt sick. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was destruction, calculated and cruel. And it was working. She could see it at the faces around her, the fear creeping back in, the doubt. Sheriff Daniels appeared, his face grim. "Everyone back! Let it burn out!" "What about evidence?" Cole demanded. "Someone locked those doors. There'll be tracks, witnesses, and by the time I can examine the scene properly, any evidence will be contaminated or destroyed by 50 people trampling through." Daniels met Cole's eyes. "I know what you want me to say, but I can't arrest Hale on suspicion. I need proof." "We just gave you proof. 8 dead horses and a burned stable." "That's proof of arson, not proof of who did it." Cole looked like he wanted to hit something. Clara grabbed his arm before he could do something stupid. "We'll find proof," she said quietly. "But not like this." Cole pulled away, frustrated, but he didn't argue. He knew she was right. They all knew. Hale was too smart to leave obvious evidence. He'd have an alibi, his men would have alibis, and the law would shrug and say there was nothing to be done. The fire burned itself out by noon. What was left of the stable was a blackened skeleton, still smoking, the smell of burned wood and flesh hanging over the town like a curse. John Mercer stood at the edge of the ruins, staring at nothing. Clara approached carefully. "John." He didn't look at her. "This is my fault. I stood up, and now my horses are dead. This is Hale's fault, not yours. Doesn't matter whose fault it is. They're still dead." He finally turned to face her, and Clara saw the defeat in his eyes. "I'm out. I can't afford to lose anything else. If you back out now, Hale wins." "He's already won. Look around, Clara. We're fighting a man with unlimited money and no conscience. What chance do we have?" Clara wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Because John was right. What chance did they have? They were farmers and ranchers and small business owners going up against a man who controlled half the valley and had the law in his pocket. She watched John walk away, shoulders slumped, and felt the first real crack in her resolve. By evening, 2 more families had pulled out. By the next morning, it was 5. The coalition was fracturing, and there was nothing Clara or Cole could do to stop it. They sat in Clara's apartment that night, exhausted and defeated. Cole had his head in his hands, and Clara could see the tension radiating through his body. "We're losing," he said. "Not yet." "Yes, we are." "People are scared, Clara, and I don't blame them. Hale's proven he'll burn them out if they don't comply." "Then we find another way." "What other way? We can't fight fire with fire. We don't have the resources or the manpower. And the law won't help us without evidence we can't get." Clara stood, paced to the window. The town below was dark and quiet. Everyone locked in their homes, waiting to see what Hale would do next. "There has to be something," she said, "some weakness we can exploit. If there is, I haven't found it." Clara turned to face him. "Then we make him show his hand, force him into a mistake." "How?" "I don't know yet, but Hale's been operating in the shadows. Maybe it's time to drag him into the light." Cole looked at her, hope warring with skepticism. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we stop playing defense. We go on offense. We make this public, not just in Three Pines, but in the county seat. We take our documentation to the newspaper, to the territorial governor if we have to. We make so much noise that Hale can't hide behind his lawyers and alibi anymore. That's risky. If we go public and fail, we'll have nothing left. We've already got nothing left. People are quitting. The town's against us. Hale's burning us out one by one. Clara moved back to sit beside him, took his hand. At least this way we go down fighting. Cole studied her face, searching for doubt. But Clara had made her decision. She was done being scared, done hiding. If Hale wanted a war, she'd give him one. All right, Cole said finally. Let's do it. They spent the next 3 days preparing. Clara organized all her documentation into a coherent narrative. Names, dates, incidents, witnesses. Cole rode to the county seat and came back with copies of property records, water rights documents, and a list of other landowners Hale had targeted over the years. The pattern was clear once you laid it all out. Hale would identify a property he wanted, systematically isolate the owner through economic pressure and social intimidation, then swoop in with a lowball offer when they were desperate. If they refused, accidents happened. Fires, livestock deaths, mysterious injuries. Always just ambiguous enough that the law couldn't prove anything, but obvious enough to send a message. Cole and Clara weren't his first victims. They were just the first ones to fight back publicly. On the 4th day, they took everything to the Three Pines Gazette, a small weekly newspaper run by a man named Thomas Brennan. He was in his 50s, gray-haired and cautious, with ink-stained fingers and the nervous energy of someone who knew how dangerous information could be. Clara and Cole sat across from him in his cramped office while he read through their documentation. The silence stretched long enough that Clara started to sweat. Finally, Brennan set the papers down. This is damning, if it's true. It's true, Cole said. You have witnesses who'll go on record? Some. Others are too scared. Brennan rubbed his face. I don't blame them. Victor Hale advertises in this paper. He's friends with my landlord. If I print this and it doesn't stick, I'm finished. Clara leaned forward. And if you don't print it and Hale keeps destroying lives, what does that make you? Brennan flinched. That's not fair. No, it's not. None of this is fair, but you have a choice. You can stay silent and let Hale win, or you can do what you're supposed to do, tell the truth. The truth can get you killed in this valley. Then I guess we'll find out together. Brennan stared at her for a long moment, then at Cole, then back at the papers. Clara could see him weighing his options, calculating risks, trying to find a way out that didn't involve choosing a side. I need to verify some of this, he said finally. Talk to witnesses. Check records. If I'm going to print something this explosive, it has to be ironclad. How long? A week? Maybe 2? Cole tensed. We don't have 2 weeks. Hale's escalating. Then you'll have to hold him off while I do my job. Brennan met Cole's eyes. I'm not saying no. I'm saying I need to do this right. Can you give me that time? Cole looked at Clara. She nodded. They didn't have a choice. 2 weeks, Cole said. But if anything happens to us before then, you print it anyway. Promise me. Brennan's face went pale, but he nodded. I promise. They left the newspaper office and walked back through town in tense silence. Clara felt exposed now, like they'd painted targets on their backs. Hale would hear about their visit. Someone would tell him. They always did. And he'd know what they were planning. He's going to come after us hard now, Cole said quietly. I know. You sure you want to see this through? Clara stopped walking, turned to face him. Are you trying to give me an out? I'm trying to give you a choice. This is about to get ugly, Clara. Really ugly, and I need to know you're ready for that. Clara thought about the girl she'd been 20 years ago, meek and invisible, accepting whatever scraps the world threw her way. Then she thought about the woman she'd become over the past few months, the one who'd stood up to Iris Calloway, who'd faced down Porter, who'd organized a resistance out of her bakery. I'm ready, she said. Cole kissed her then, right there in the middle of Main Street with half the town watching. It was defiant and desperate and perfect. When they pulled apart, Clara saw Iris Calloway staring at them from across the street, her face twisted with disgust. Clara smiled at her, genuine and unapologetic, and watched Iris turn away. Let them talk. Let them judge. Clara was done caring. The first attack came 2 nights later. Clara was closing up the bakery when she heard glass shatter in the alley behind her building. She grabbed the rolling pin she kept under the counter and moved toward the back door, heart hammering. Through the window, she could see 2 men, Porter and another of Hale's ranch hands, standing over a pile of broken crates that used to hold her flour sacks. "That's a shame," Porter called out, loud enough for her to hear. "All that flour ruined. Guess you'll have to reorder. If your supplier's still willing to sell to you, that is." Clara's hands tightened on the rolling pin. They were baiting her, trying to get her to come outside so they could claim self-defense when they hurt her. She stayed put. Porter waited a few more minutes, then laughed and walked away with his companion. Clara watched them go, then went out to survey the damage. 3 weeks' worth of flour scattered across the alley and soaked with whatever liquid they dumped on it. Hundreds of dollars of inventory, destroyed. Clara felt tears burn her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She went back inside, locked the door, and started calculating how much money she had left and whether it would be enough to restock. It wasn't. Cole found her an hour later, sitting in the dark with her ledger open, staring at numbers that didn't add up. "I heard what happened," he said. "They destroyed my flour." "I know. Mercer's supplier refused to deliver to him yesterday. They're cutting off our resources." Clara looked up at him. "We're not going to make it 2 weeks. We'll find a way." "How? I can't bake without flour. You can't run a ranch without feed. Hale's choking us out, and we can't stop him." Cole knelt in front of her chair, took her hands. "Then we take the fight to him. Now. Tonight." "What?" "We go to his ranch. We confront him. We make him answer for what he's done." Clara shook her head. "That's insane. He'll have us arrested, or worse." "Maybe, but at least we'll get it on record. Whatever he says, whatever he does, Sheriff Daniels will have to respond. Unless Daniels is already in Hale's pocket." "He's not. I know him. He's cautious, but he's not corrupt." Clara wanted to believe that, but she'd seen too much corruption disguised as caution, too many men in power who chose the easy path over the right one. Still, Cole was right about one thing. They were running out of options, and sitting here watching Hale destroy them piece by piece wasn't working. "All right," Clara said. "Let's go." They rode out to Hale's ranch just after midnight, the moon bright enough to light their way. Hale's property was massive, a sprawling main house, multiple barns, corrals full of prime livestock. Everything Three Pines wasn't: prosperous, maintained, untouchable. They tied their horses at the gate and walked up the long drive. Lights burned in the main house, and Clara could see figures moving behind the windows. Cole knocked on the front door, loud and insistent. It opened after a moment, and Porter stood there, smirking. "Well, well, Mr. Maddox and Miss Boone, to what do we owe the pleasure?" "We're here to see Hale," Cole said. "Mr. Hale is not receiving visitors at this hour." "He'll see us." Porter's smirk widened. "I don't think he will." A voice called from inside the house. "Let them in, Porter." Porter stepped aside, and Clara and Cole walked into Victor Hale's home. It was everything Clara expected: expensive furniture, polished wood, a stone fireplace big enough to stand in, the kind of wealth that came from taking, not earning. Victor Hale sat in a leather chair by the fire, glass of whiskey in hand. He was older than Clara had imagined, late 50s, maybe early 60s, with silver hair and the kind of face that looked kind until you saw the calculation in his eyes. "Mr. Maddox." "Miss Boone." Hale gestured to the chairs across from him. "Please sit." Neither of them sat. "We know what you're doing," Cole said. "The threats, the fires, the sabotage. We know it's you." Hale sipped his whiskey, unbothered. "That's quite an accusation. Do you have proof?" "We're gathering it." "Ah, so no proof then, just suspicion and paranoia." Hale set his glass down. "Let me offer you some advice, Mr. Maddox. This valley has an order. I maintain that order. When people disrupt it, there are consequences, natural consequences." "Natural," Clara said, her voice sharp. "Like 8 horses burning to death in a locked stable?" Hale's eyes slid to her, and Clara felt the full weight of his attention. It was like being studied by a predator. "You're an interesting woman, Miss Boone," Hale said. "Most people in your position would have stayed quiet, kept their heads down, but you've chosen to make yourself a problem." "I've chosen to stand up to a bully." "I'm not a bully. I'm a businessman, and business requires certain adjustments. Properties consolidate, markets shift. People who can't adapt get left behind. You mean people who won't sell to you get burned out? Hale smiled, thin and cold. I mean, people make choices, and choices have outcomes. Cole stepped forward, hands clenched into fists. Stop dancing around it. You want my land. I won't sell, so you're trying to force me out. Force is such an ugly word. I prefer encourage. Call it whatever you want. It's still theft. Theft? Hale stood, and despite his age, there was something intimidating about him. I'm offering you fair market value for a failing ranch. That's not theft. That's charity. Your offer is half what the land's worth. It's worth what someone's willing to pay. And given your debts, your failing herd, and your recent troubles, I'm the only buyer you're going to find. Hale's smile widened. But I'm a reasonable man. I'll make you a new offer. Sell me the ranch today, and I'll pay full price. You can walk away with enough money to start over somewhere else. Somewhere without complications. He glanced at Clara when he said complications, and the message was clear. Cole's voice was tight with rage. No. Then you're a fool, and Miss Boone is an even bigger fool for standing beside you. Clara stepped forward, meeting Hale's eyes without flinching. I'd rather be a fool fighting for what's right than a rich man destroying lives for profit. Hale studied her for a long moment. You know what I see when I look at you, Miss Boone? A woman who's finally getting attention from a man and has mistaken that for love. You think Cole Maddox cares about you? He's using you. For your bakery's location, for your connections in town, for whatever leverage he can get. And when this is over, he'll leave you behind just like everyone else has. The words hit like a physical blow. Clara felt them land in all her old wounds, all the places where doubt and insecurity lived. For a moment, she almost believed him. Then she felt Cole's hand close around hers, solid and warm, and the doubt evaporated. You're wrong, Clara said quietly, about everything. About Cole, about me, and about what's going to happen next. Hale's expression hardened. And what's that? We're going to destroy you, not with violence, not with threats, with the truth. We're taking everything you've done, every crime, every cruelty, and we're making it public. And when we're done, you'll be the one left with nothing. For the first time, something flickered in Hale's eyes. Not fear, exactly, but wariness. Recognition that Clara and Cole weren't bluffing. Get out of my house, Hale said softly. Gladly. Cole pulled Clara toward the door. Porter blocked their way. Mr. Hale didn't dismiss you yet. Move, Cole growled. Porter's hand went to his belt, where Clara could see the outline of a knife. The room went tense, violence crackling in the air. Let them go, Porter, Hale said. For now. Porter stepped aside, and Cole and Clara walked out into the night. They didn't run, didn't hurry, even though every instinct screamed at them to get away. They walked to their horses with their heads high, mounted up, and rode away. They were halfway back to town before either of them spoke. That was stupid, Cole said. I know. We just showed our hand, told him exactly what we're planning. I know. He's going to come after us with everything he has now. Clara looked at him. I know. But at least now we're not waiting for it. We know what's coming. Cole laughed, bitter but real. You're terrifying sometimes, you know that? Good, I'm tired of being scared. They rode the rest of the way in silence, and when they reached Clara's bakery, Cole didn't leave. He stayed the night, holding her while they both pretended to sleep, waiting for dawn and whatever hell Hale was about to unleash. It came faster than they expected. The attack came at 3 a.m, 2 days after they confronted Hale. Clara woke to the sound of breaking glass and Cole shouting her name. She rolled out of bed, disoriented, and smelled smoke. Not the clean wood smoke of a cooking fire. This was chemical, acrid, choking. Cole burst through her bedroom door, grabbed her arm. We have to go. Now. What's happening? Fire, downstairs. They threw something through the window. Clara's brain caught up with her body. The bakery. They were burning her bakery. She grabbed her shawl and the lockbox where she kept her documentation, and Cole dragged her toward the back stairs. Smoke was already rising through the floorboards, thick and black, and Clara could hear the fire roaring below. They made it to the alley just as the front windows exploded outward, flames shooting into the street. People were emerging from nearby buildings, shouting, running for buckets. But Clara knew it was too late. The fire had taken hold too fast, too hot. Whatever they'd used, it wasn't just kerosene. Cole pulled her away from the building, across the street, and Clara watched her life burn. 23 years of work, of survival, of building something that was hers, gone in minutes. Sheriff Daniels appeared beside them, his face illuminated by the flames. "Anyone hurt?" "No," Cole said. "But they tried." "Who? Who do you think?" Daniels's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. What could he say? They all knew who was responsible. They just couldn't prove it. The bakery burned until dawn. By the time the sun rose, all that was left was a smoking shell, blackened walls, collapsed roof, everything Clara owned reduced to ash and memory. She stood in the street staring at the ruins, numb. Cole had his arm around her, but Clara barely felt it. She was somewhere else, somewhere cold and distant where feelings couldn't reach. "Clara," Cole's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Say something." "What's there to say?" "That you're angry, that you're scared. Something." Clara turned to look at him. His face was streaked with soot, his eyes red from smoke, and she could see the guilt written across every line of his expression. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "No. Yes. If I hadn't involved you, if I'd just sold to Hale like everyone else—" "Stop!" Clara's voice was sharp enough to cut. "Don't you dare do that. Don't you dare take responsibility for what Hale chose to do. We made our choices. Both of us. And I'd make the same ones again. Your bakery's gone, Clara. Everything you built. Buildings can be rebuilt. But if I'd walked away from you, from this fight, I'd have lost something I couldn't get back." Clara touched his face, made him look at her. "I'd have lost myself." Cole's eyes filled with tears, and Clara felt her own numbness finally crack. The grief hit her all at once, for the bakery, for her mother's legacy, for the life she'd known. But beneath the grief was something harder, sharper. Rage. Pure, white-hot rage that burned away every last shred of fear. "He thinks this will break us," Clara said, her voice steady, despite the tears streaming down her face. "He thinks we'll run now, give up and disappear. But he's wrong. This just made me angrier." Anne appeared at Clara's side, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Come on, you can stay with me until we figure something out." Clara let herself be led away from the ruins, Cole beside her, and tried not to look back. But she could feel the heat on her skin, smell the smoke in her hair, and she knew she'd never forget this moment. Never forget what Hale had taken from her. They spent the rest of the morning at Anne's house, a small, tidy place at the edge of town where the widow lived alone since her husband had died 5 years back. Anne made coffee and eggs that Clara couldn't eat, and Cole paced the small kitchen like a caged animal. "We need to leave," he said finally. "Both of us. Tonight. We'll go to the county seat, stay there until Brennan's ready to publish." "And abandon everyone else?" Clara shook her head. "The other ranchers, the people who stood with us, we leave, and Hale picks them off one by one. They're already backing out. After this, no one's going to stand with us." "You don't know that." A knock at the door interrupted them. Anne answered it, and John Mercer walked in, hat in his hands. He looked at Clara, at the smoke-stained clothes she still wore, and his face crumpled. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have stayed with you, should have kept fighting." "It's okay, John. It's not. I let fear make me a coward, and now you've lost everything because you were brave enough to keep standing." Cole stepped forward. "Then stand with us now. Help us finish this." Mercer looked between them, and Clara could see the war playing out behind his eyes. Fear versus guilt, safety versus honor. Finally, he nodded. "What do you need?" "Witnesses. Evidence. People willing to go on record with what Hale's done." Cole's voice was hard. "We're not running. We're taking him down, and we need everyone who suffered at his hands to speak up." "That's a lot of people." "Then get them. Today. Bring them here, to Anne's. We're going to build a case so ironclad that even Hale's lawyers can't wriggle out of it." Mercer left, and over the next few hours, people started arriving. Not all the ranchers who'd originally stood with them. Some were too scared or too broken, but enough. 7 families in total, each with stories of intimidation, sabotage, threats that had never been reported because what was the point when Hale owned half the valley? Clara sat in Anne's parlor with her salvaged lockbox and started taking statements. She wrote down every detail, had each person sign and date their account, and slowly built a record of systematic terror that had been hiding in plain sight for years. One woman, Mary Sutton, wife of a rancher on the eastern edge of the valley, broke down crying as she described how Hale's men had poisoned their well after her husband refused to sell. "We lost 30 head of cattle," she sobbed. "Our children got sick drinking that water before we realized. My youngest, she was only 4, she almost died. And we couldn't prove anything. The doctor said it was bad water, but when we tested it later, everything came back clean. They'd already flushed whatever they used through the system." Clara held Mary's hand while the woman wept and felt her rage crystallize into something cold and focused. Hale hadn't just attacked property. He'd gone after children, and he'd gotten away with it because people were too scared to fight back. Not anymore. By evening, they had 14 statements, cross-referenced and documented. Cole took everything and rode to the county seat to find Brennan, leaving Clara in Anne's care with strict instructions not to leave the house. Clara lasted about 2 hours before the walls started closing in. "I need air," she told Anne. Cole said, "I know what Cole said, but I'm not going to sit here and hide like a frightened rabbit. I need to see what's left of the bakery. I need to—" She trailed off, not sure how to explain the pull she felt toward the ruins, like she had to witness it fully, had to let herself grieve properly before she could move forward. Anne studied her face, then nodded. "I'll come with you." They walked through town as the sun set, casting long shadows across the street. People stared at Clara, some with pity, some with judgment, some with barely concealed satisfaction. Clara ignored them all. She'd stopped caring what they thought the moment her life went up in flames. The bakery was worse in the fading light. The walls still stood, barely, but everything inside was gone. Clara could see through to where her oven had been, just twisted metal now, unrecognizable. The counter where she'd served thousands of customers was a pile of charred wood, and upstairs where her small apartment had been, there was nothing but open air and blackened beams. "I'm so sorry, Clara," Anne whispered. Clara didn't trust herself to speak. She just stood there, trying to memorize every detail, every loss. This was Hale's work. This was the cost of standing up to men who thought they owned everything. "Clara Boone," she turned. Iris Calloway stood a few feet away, looking uncomfortable. Behind her were Margaret and Louise, the women who'd come to intimidate Clara weeks ago. "What do you want, Iris?" "I came to—" Iris faltered, then pushed forward. "I came to apologize." Clara blinked. "What?" "For what I said. For how I treated you. For—" Iris gestured at the ruins. "For not believing you when you said Hale was dangerous." Margaret stepped forward too. "We thought you were being dramatic, making trouble where there wasn't any. But we were wrong." "Why the change of heart?" Clara kept her voice neutral, not ready to trust this yet. Louise spoke up, her voice shaking. "Because my nephew worked for Hale, and last night, after your bakery burned, he came home drunk and crying. He said he couldn't do it anymore, couldn't hurt people for money. He told me things—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "Terrible things. About fires and threats and beatings, all on Hale's orders." Clara's heart started racing. "Will he testify?" "He's terrified. Hale threatened to kill anyone who talks." "But he's willing." Louise nodded slowly. "If you can promise him protection. If you can promise Hale will actually face consequences this time." Clara looked at Anne, saw the same desperate hope in her face. This could be it. The break they needed. A witness from inside Hale's operation, someone who could connect him directly to the crimes. "Where is he?" Clara asked. "At my house, hiding. He thinks Hale's men are looking for him." "They probably are. Come on." Clara started walking, Anne and the 3 women hurrying to keep up. They cut through alleys and back streets, avoiding the main roads where Hale's men might be watching. By the time they reached Louise's small house on the south end of town, night had fully fallen. Louise's nephew, a boy who couldn't have been more than 19, sat at the kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey and shaking hands. His name was Tommy, and he looked like he'd aged 10 years in one night. "Tommy," Clara said gently, sitting across from him, "I need you to tell me everything." He looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. "They'll kill me. Not if we stop them first, but I need to know what you know, all of it." Tommy took a long drink, then started talking. And Clara listened, writing down every word as the full extent of Hale's operation came into focus. It was worse than she'd imagined. Hale had been running a systematic campaign of terror for nearly 5 years. He had men on his payroll whose sole job was intimidation, burning buildings, poisoning wells, threatening families. He had informants in town who reported on anyone organizing against him. He even had someone in the sheriff's office feeding him information about investigations. "Who?" Clara demanded. "Who's the informant?" Tommy shook his head. "I don't know. Hale never said names for that, just that he had eyes everywhere and we'd never get away with turning on him. But you're turning on him now, because I can't sleep anymore. Can't look at myself in the mirror. We hurt people, Miss Boone. Good people who just wanted to keep their land, and for what? So Hale could get richer?" Tommy's voice broke. "I set that fire at the livery. I locked those doors. Those horses. I can still hear them screaming." Clara reached across the table, gripped his hand. "Then help me make it right, testify. Give us names, dates, everything you know. Help me put Hale away so he can't hurt anyone else." Tommy looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but you have to get me out of here tonight, before Hale realizes I'm gone." "We will, I promise." Clara sent Anne to find Sheriff Daniels while she continued taking Tommy's statement. By the time Daniels arrived, she had 5 pages of testimony that would bury Hale if it ever saw a courtroom. Daniels read through it, his face getting darker with each page. When he finished, he looked at Tommy. "You willing to swear to this?" "Yes, sir." "You understand what that means? Hale will come after you with everything he has." "I understand." Daniels nodded slowly. "Then we need to get you somewhere safe. Somewhere Hale can't reach you." He looked at Clara. "Where's Cole?" "County seat, with our documentation." "Good. I'm taking Tommy there tonight. We'll meet up with Cole, get the territorial marshal involved. This is beyond what I can handle alone." Daniels stood. "Clara, you need to stay out of sight until this is over. Hale knows you're the one coordinating this. He'll be coming for you next." "Let him come." "I'm serious. No heroics. Stay with Anne, keep your head down, and let me do my job." Clara wanted to argue, but she could see the genuine concern in Daniel's face. He wasn't trying to sideline her. He was trying to keep her alive. "All right," she said. Daniels and Tommy left through the back door, moving quickly into the night. Clara watched them go, then turned to find Iris, Margaret, and Louise staring at her. "You're really going to do it," Iris said quietly. "You're going to take Hale down." "I'm going to try." "What can we do to help?" Clara looked at the 3 women who'd made her life hell just weeks ago, who'd mocked her and judged her and tried to drive her away from Cole. And she saw something new in their faces now. Respect. Maybe even admiration. "Spread the word," Clara said. "Tell everyone what Tommy testified to. Make sure the whole town knows what Hale's been doing. If we're lucky, public pressure will force the marshal to act fast. And if we're not lucky, then at least people will know the truth before Hale tries to bury it." The women left, and Clara was alone with Anne in the quiet house. Exhaustion hit her all at once, physical, emotional, mental. She'd been running on adrenaline and rage for days, and it was finally catching up. "You should rest," Anne said gently. "I can't. Not until Cole gets back." "He won't be back until tomorrow at earliest. The county seat's a full day's ride." Clara knew Anne was right, but the thought of sleeping while Cole was out there, while Hale was still free, while everything hung in the balance, it felt impossible. She tried anyway. Anne gave her a bed in the spare room, and Clara lay down fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flames, saw her bakery burning, saw Cole bleeding on her floor that first morning, saw the long, hard road that had brought her to this moment. She must have dozed eventually, because she woke to shouting in the street. Clara bolted upright, heart pounding. Through the window she could see torches, a group of men, maybe a dozen, moving through town, and they were heading toward Anne's house. Anne burst into the room. "They're coming for you, Hale's men." "How do you know?" "Because I can see Porter leading them. And they're carrying rifles. Clara's mind raced. If they caught her here, Anne would be in danger too. She couldn't let that happen. Is there a back way out? She asked. Through the cellar. But Clara, where will you go? Cole's ranch. It's far enough that maybe they won't follow. That's an hour's ride. You'll never make it on foot. Then I'll borrow your horse. Anne grabbed Clara's arm. This is insane. Let me talk to them. Maybe I can... They're not here to talk. Look at them, Anne. They're here to finish what the fire started. Through the window, Clara could see the mob getting closer. Porter was shouting something, but she couldn't make out the words. The message was clear enough anyway. Anne pulled Clara toward the cellar stairs. They moved fast, Clara's borrowed boots slipping on the wooden steps. The cellar was small and damp, smelling of earth and old vegetables. At the far end was a door that led to Anne's small stable. Take Daisy, Anne said, pointing to a gray mare. She's steady and fast. Just bring her back when this is over. Clara grabbed Anne's hand. Thank you for everything. Just stay alive. That's all the thanks I need. Clara saddled Daisy with shaking hands, hearing the mob pounding on Anne's front door. She led the mare out of the stable and mounted up just as she heard wood splintering. They'd broken down the door. She kicked Daisy into a gallop and rode hard for the north road, not looking back. The ride to Cole's ranch took 45 minutes of flat-out running. By the time Clara reached the property, Daisy was lathered and blowing hard. Clara dismounted, led the mare to the water trough, and looked around. The ranch was dark and silent. Cole's stallion was in the corral, which meant he hadn't made it back yet. Clara was alone. She led Daisy into the barn, unsaddled her, and tried to figure out what to do next. The smart move would be to hide. In the barn, in the house, somewhere Porter and his men wouldn't think to look. But Clara was done hiding. If they wanted a fight, she'd give them one. She found Cole's rifle in the house, an old Winchester he kept for predators, and checked that it was loaded. Then she positioned herself on the porch where she could see the road and waited. They came an hour after dawn. 6 men on horseback, Porter in the lead. They rode up slowly, rifles across their saddles, spreading out in a loose semicircle around the house. Porter stayed mounted, staring at Clara on the porch. She held the Winchester loosely, not pointing it at anyone yet, but making sure they could all see it. "Miss Boone," Porter called out, "you're making this harder than it needs to be." "Am I?" "Mr. Hale sent us to deliver a message. He's willing to forget all this unpleasantness if you and Maddox leave the valley. Today, he'll even pay you for your trouble." "How generous." "I'm serious. Take the money and go. Start over somewhere else, somewhere you won't get hurt." Clara laughed, bitter and sharp. "Is that what you told the Sutton children before you poisoned their well? Is that what you told those horses before you burned them alive?" Porter's face hardened. "Those were accidents." "No, they were terrorism, and I've got witnesses who will testify to exactly that, including one of your own men." A ripple went through the group. Porter leaned forward in his saddle. "Who?" "Doesn't matter. What matters is the territorial marshal knows everything now. About the fires, the threats, the poisonings, about Hale's systematic campaign to steal land. And there's nothing you can do to stop what's coming. There's one thing." Porter's hand moved to his rifle. Clara raised the Winchester, sighted down the barrel at Porter's chest. "Think very carefully about your next move." "You won't shoot." "You willing to bet your life on that?" Porter hesitated. Clara could see the calculation in his face, weighing the odds, trying to figure out if she was bluffing. She wasn't. She'd kill him if she had to. Kill all of them if that's what it took to survive. A shot rang out, but it didn't come from Clara or Porter. It came from the ridge above the house, where Sheriff Daniels sat on horseback with his own rifle raised. "Next one goes through somebody," Daniels called down. "Your choice who?" Porter wheeled his horse around, saw Daniels, saw the territorial marshal riding up behind him with a dozen deputies. His face went white. "You're all under arrest," the marshal said, his voice carrying across the property. "Conspiracy, arson, attempted murder. Drop your weapons." For a moment, Clara thought Porter might run. Then his shoulders slumped and he dropped his rifle to the ground. The other men followed suit. Daniels rode down to the house while the deputies rounded up Porter's group. He looked at Clara standing on the porch with Cole's Winchester still raised. "You can put that down now," he said gently. Clara lowered the rifle, and her hands started shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Daniels dismounted, took the gun from her, and Clara's knees buckled.
She sat down hard on the porch steps, breathing in short, sharp gasps. "You did good," Daniel said. "Real good. Is it over?" "Not yet, but we've got enough to arrest Hale. Marshall's heading to his ranch now." Clara looked up at him. "Will it stick? The charges?" "With Tommy's testimony and all the documentation you and Cole put together? Yeah, it'll stick." Daniel smiled. "You won, Clara." She wanted to feel relief, triumph, something, but all she felt was tired. Bone-deep, soul-crushing tired. Cole rode up an hour later, his horse nearly dead from exhaustion.
He saw the deputies, saw the arrested men, saw Clara sitting on his porch looking shell-shocked. He dismounted before his horse fully stopped and ran to her. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. It's over. They arrested Porter and—" Clara stopped, looked at Daniels. "Did they get Hale?" Daniels nodded. "Marshall sent word an hour ago. Hale's in custody. They found evidence at his ranch, ledgers, correspondence, proof of payments to his men for specific jobs. He kept records of everything." "Why would he do that?" Cole asked. "Insurance, probably. Or arrogance. Men like Hale never think they'll get caught." Daniel stood. "I need to get back to town. Clara, you'll need to give a formal statement tomorrow. Cole, you too." "We'll be there," Cole said. Daniels rode off with the deputies and their prisoners, leaving Cole and Clara alone on the porch. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the sun climb higher, feeling the weight of everything they'd been through settle into something manageable. "I thought I lost you," Cole said finally. "When I got back to town and Anne told me what happened, I'm okay. I'm here. Your bakery can be rebuilt. Buildings are just buildings, Cole. You and me. That's what matters." Cole pulled her close, and Clara let herself finally break. She cried for everything she'd lost, everything she'd fought for, everything she'd survived. And Cole held her through it all, solid and steady and hers. When the tears finally stopped, Clara pulled back and looked at him. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now?" Cole smiled. "Now we rebuild. The bakery, the ranch, our lives. Together." "Together," Clara repeated. And for the first time in weeks, she believed it was possible. The trial took 3 months to convene, and those months tested Clara in ways the fire never had. Hale hired the best lawyers money could buy, 3 of them from back east, men in expensive suits who talked fast and made everything sound complicated. They tried to get the charges dismissed, tried to discredit Tommy's testimony, tried to paint Hale as a legitimate businessman being persecuted by jealous neighbors. Clara sat through every day of testimony, taking notes, watching the jury's faces. Cole sat beside her, their hands linked, both of them afraid to hope too much. The courtroom was stuffy and overcrowded, smelling of sweat and old wood, and the particular tension that comes when powerful men face consequences for the first time in their lives. The prosecution built their case methodically. They brought in Tommy first, who described in detail the jobs he'd done for Hale, the fires, the threats, the intimidation. Tommy's voice shook as he recounted locking the livery stable doors, hearing the horses scream, and walking away because Hale had paid him to. Hale's lawyers tore into him during cross-examination. They called him a liar and a drunk, pointed out his criminal record from years back, petty theft when he was 16, a bar fight at 19. They painted him as an unreliable witness seeking revenge against an employer who'd fired him for incompetence. But Tommy held steady. "I did terrible things for that man," he said, pointing at Hale. "And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it. But I'm telling the truth now, every word." The lead defense attorney, Garrison, sneered. "Convenient that you found your conscience right when the prosecution needed a witness." "I found my conscience when I couldn't sleep anymore, when I saw what we'd done to Miss Boone's bakery and realized we could have killed her, when I looked in the mirror and saw a man I didn't recognize." Tommy's eyes were wet. "You want to call me a liar? Fine, but those ledgers don't lie, and neither do the people we hurt." Then the prosecution brought in the ledgers they'd found at Hale's ranch, page after page of payments, each one corresponding to a date when something had happened. A fire, a poisoned well, a beating. The prosecution had an accountant walk the jury through every entry, matching them to incidents reported in the valley. Here, on March 15th, a payment of $50 to J. Porter with the notation "North Valley problem resolved." On March 16th, The Hendricks family's barn burned down. They'd refused to sell to Mr. Hale the week prior. April 3rd, payment of $75 with the notation, water issue handled. April 4th, the Suttons reported their well had been poisoned. May 22nd, $100, notation simply says horses. May 23rd, the livery fire. The numbers didn't lie, and Hale's lawyers couldn't explain them away. They tried, claimed the ledgers were fabricated, that the dates were coincidental, that the notations were taken out of context. But the accountant was unshakable, and the pattern was too consistent to ignore. Next came the ranchers. John Mercer testified about losing his horses, his voice breaking when he described the sound they made dying. Mary Sutton broke down again describing her daughter's illness, how the 4-year-old had writhed in pain from the poisoned water, how they'd thought they were going to lose her. The doctor said it was contamination, Mary sobbed. But when we tested the well a week later, it came back clean. Someone put something in there that broke down fast, something that would hurt us but not leave evidence. 7 more families told their stories. A rancher named Williams described how his cattle had been scattered in the night, driven into a ravine where 30 head broke their legs and had to be shot. A widow named Patricia Chen explained how Hale's men had threatened her children walking home from school, told them their mother should sell before something bad happened. Each testimony added another layer to the case, another piece of evidence that Hale's operation wasn't business, it was terrorism. Clara testified on day 5. She walked to the stand with her head high, wearing the only decent dress she owned, borrowed from Anne because everything else had burned. The courtroom fell silent as she was sworn in. Everyone knew her story. Everyone had heard about the bakery burning, about her standing on Cole's porch with a rifle facing down Hale's men. Garrison, Hale's lead lawyer, approached her with a condescending smile. Miss Boone, Mrs. Maddox, Clara corrected. She and Cole had married quietly 2 weeks earlier, unable to wait any longer. Garrison's smile thinned. Mrs. Maddox, you've painted quite a dramatic picture of my client, but isn't it true that you have a personal grudge against Mr. Hale? No. No? He didn't refuse you something? Didn't reject you in some way that might make you want revenge? Claire kept her voice steady. I never met Victor Hale until he started threatening the man I love. This isn't about grudges, it's about justice. The man you love. Garrison's tone made it sound dirty. That would be Mr. Maddox, correct? The man who owes Mr. Hale a considerable sum of money? Cole doesn't owe Hale anything. Hale manufactured those debts by buying up legitimate loans at inflated prices, then calling them due early to create artificial financial pressure. According to you. But you're not a financial expert, are you, Mrs. Maddox? You're a baker, or you were until your shop unfortunately burned down. Unfortunately? Clara felt her temper flare but kept it controlled. Your client's men threw incendiary devices through my windows at 3 a.m. while I was sleeping upstairs. I have burn scars on my hands from trying to put out the fire. That's not unfortunate. That's attempted murder. Objection, Garrison said smoothly. Speculation. Mrs. Maddox has no proof my client was involved. I have Porter's confession, Clara shot back. I have Tommy's testimony. I have the timing of every attack, which matches perfectly with when Cole and I took steps against your client. I have the fact that your client threatened me personally at his ranch 2 days before my bakery burned. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, may I redirect? The judge nodded, and Clara's lawyer, a young man named Davidson from the county seat, approached the stand. Mrs. Maddox, can you describe what Mr. Hale said to you when you confronted him at his ranch? Clara took a breath, forcing herself to stay calm and factual. He told Cole and me that we should leave the valley, that people who disrupted his order faced natural consequences. When I challenged him about the fires and poisonings, he didn't deny them. He just said people make choices and choices have outcomes. Did you take that as a threat? Absolutely. And 2 days later, my home and business burned down. So yes, I understood exactly what he meant. Garrison tried to shake her testimony during recross, but Clara didn't budge. She'd lived through too much to be intimidated by a lawyer's tricks. When she finally stepped down, she caught Hale's eye across the courtroom. He stared at her with pure hatred, and Clara stared right back, refusing to look away first. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. She'd already survived the worst he could do. The defense tried to present Hale as a pillar of the community, generous, kind, misunderstood. They brought in businessmen who'd profited from his investments, townspeople who'd received donations, even a few ranch hands who swore Hale had always treated them fairly. But the prosecution was ready. They cross-examined each witness, asking pointed questions. Mr. Hale donated to the church, you said. Did he ever attach conditions to those donations? Well, sometimes he'd suggest how the money should be used. Suggest or demand? And what happened to organizations that refused his suggestions? I'm not sure I understand the question. Let me be more specific. When the Ladies' Aid Society rejected Mr. Hale's demand that they stop serving the Hendricks family after their barn burned, didn't he withdraw all his funding? There were other reasons. Yes or no, sir? Did he withdraw funding? Yes. Each defense witness crumbled under scrutiny, revealing the control Hale had exerted over Three Pines through money and fear. Even his supporters had been operating under subtle threats, doing what he wanted because the alternative was losing everything. Iris Calloway took the stand for the defense, and Clara felt a twist of something like pity watching her squirm. Iris looked older than her years, tired, like testifying was the last thing she wanted to do. Mr. Hale has always been good to Three Pines, Iris said carefully, her voice lacking conviction. He's helped many families. Including yours? The prosecutor asked on cross-examination. Well, yes. He donated to the church fund. My husband is a deacon. And did Mr. Hale ever threaten to withdraw that donation if you didn't support him? Iris hesitated, glancing at Hale. Clara could see the fear in her eyes. Even now, even in a courtroom surrounded by law and order, Iris was still afraid. Mrs. Calloway, the prosecutor pressed, you're under oath. Did Victor Hale threaten your family? He said, Iris's voice was barely audible. He said my husband would lose his position if I testified against him, that our business would suffer, that people would know we'd betrayed him. Betrayed him how? By telling the truth? Yes. And you believe those threats? Yes, because I've seen what happens to people who cross Victor Hale. I've seen their businesses fail, their reputations destroyed, their lives ruined. Iris's voice grew stronger. I was scared. I'm still scared. But I'm more scared of what kind of town we'll have if we let him keep doing this. The courtroom erupted in whispers, and the judge had to bang his gavel for order. Garrison looked furious. Hale's face had gone pale, and Clara felt a surge of unexpected gratitude toward Iris. It couldn't have been easy, admitting all that in public. But she'd done it anyway. The defense rested the next day, and both sides gave their closing arguments. The prosecutor was methodical, walking the jury through every piece of evidence, every testimony, building a case that felt ironclad. Victor Hale thought he was above the law, the prosecutor said, pacing in front of the jury box. He thought his money and his influence made him untouchable. He terrorized an entire valley, destroyed lives and property, and believed he'd never face consequences. But he was wrong. Because Clara Maddox and Cole Maddox and John Mercer and Mary Sutton and all the others, they refused to stay silent. They stood up, they documented, they fought back. And now it's up to you to decide whether the law applies to everyone or just to people without money and power. Garrison's closing argument tried to inject doubt, to paint Hale as the victim of a conspiracy by jealous neighbors who couldn't compete in the free market. But his words rang hollow after weeks of testimony. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Clara and Cole waited at Anne's house, neither of them able to eat or sleep properly. Clara paced the small parlor, replaying every moment of the trial, wondering if they'd done enough. Cole sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing, his hands clenched into fists. What if they don't convict? Clara asked on the second morning of deliberations. They will. But what if they don't? What if Hale's lawyers convince them there's reasonable doubt? Cole stood, crossed to her, took her face in his hands. Then we appeal. We keep fighting. We don't stop until justice is done. I'm scared, Cole. I know, so am I. They held each other, two people who'd lost almost everything and were waiting to find out if it had been worth it. On the afternoon of the second day, Sheriff Daniels knocked on Anne's door. They've reached a verdict, he said. The walk to the courthouse felt endless. Clara's legs were shaking, her hands cold despite the summer heat. Cole kept his arm around her waist, steadying her, and she wondered how he could be so calm when their entire future hung in the balance. The courtroom was packed, Standing room only, people spilling out into the hallway. Clara and Cole sat in the front row, surrounded by the ranchers and townspeople who'd testified. Behind them, Clara could hear whispers, feel the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down. Hale sat at the defense table looking smaller than Clara remembered, his expensive lawyers flanking him like bodyguards, but she could see cracks in his composure, the way his hands trembled slightly, the pale cast to his skin, the tightness around his eyes. He was afraid. For the first time, Victor Hale was genuinely afraid. The judge entered and everyone stood. Clara's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The judge asked everyone to be seated, then called for the jury. They filed in slowly, 12 faces Clara had studied for weeks, trying to read their thoughts. Some looked at Hale, some looked at the floor. Some looked directly at Clara. She couldn't tell what any of it meant. The judge asked the jury foreman, a middle-aged rancher named Sullivan, to stand. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of conspiracy to commit arson, how do you find the defendant? Sullivan's voice was clear and strong. Guilty. Clara felt Cole's hand tighten around hers. Someone behind them gasped. Hale's face went white. On the charge of attempted murder? Guilty. On the charge of extortion? Guilty. On the charge of witness intimidation? Guilty. The verdict came down on all 17 counts. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Each word landed like a hammer blow, and Clara watched Hale's empire crumble around him in real time. His lawyers were already whispering urgently, preparing appeals, but it didn't matter. The jury had spoken. The people had spoken. Victor Hale had been held accountable. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later, and the courtroom erupted as soon as he left. People were crying, hugging, shouting with relief. Clara sat frozen, unable to quite believe it was real. We won, Cole whispered. Clara, we won. She turned to him, saw tears streaming down his face, and suddenly she was crying too. They held each other while the celebration swirled around them, and Clara felt years of fear and tension drain out of her body all at once. They'd won. They'd actually won. The sentencing hearing was shorter but no less dramatic. Hale's lawyers pleaded for leniency, citing his age and his contributions to the community. The prosecutor asked for the maximum sentence on every count. The judge, a stern-faced man in his 60s who'd presided over the entire trial without showing much emotion, finally spoke. Mr. Hale, you've been convicted of 17 serious crimes. These aren't victimless offenses. You terrorized an entire community. You destroyed property, poisoned wells, endangered children, and attempted murder. You did all of this not out of desperation or necessity, but out of greed. You wanted more land, more power, more control, and you didn't care who you hurt to get it. Hale stood at the defense table, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. The law allows me to sentence you to up to 5 years per count, to be served consecutively. Given the severity and scope of your crimes, I'm inclined to impose the maximum. The judge paused. However, I'm also mindful that harsh sentences should serve justice, not vengeance. Therefore, I sentence you to 20 years in territorial prison, with the possibility of parole after 12. Your assets will be seized to pay restitution to your victims, and you are barred from owning property in this territory for life. 20 years. Clara did the math quickly. Hale was 61 now. 20 years would make him 81, assuming he lived that long. Even with parole, he'd be an old man when he got out. Broken, powerless, forgotten. It was exactly what he deserved. Hale's lawyers immediately filed notice of appeal, but it didn't matter. The man was going to prison, his empire was being dismantled, and the valley was finally free. Clara walked out of the courthouse into bright sunlight and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Lightness. Like a weight she'd been carrying for so long she'd forgotten it was there, had suddenly been lifted. Cole pulled her into his arms right there on the courthouse steps, kissed her in front of everyone, and Clara didn't care who saw. Let them talk. Let them judge. She'd survived fire and violence and a trial that could have gone either way. She'd earned the right to kiss her husband in public without shame. We did it, Cole whispered against her hair. Yeah, Clara said, laughing and crying at the same time. We really did. The restitution process took weeks to sort out. Hale's ranch was valued and auctioned off. The
the proceeds divided among his victims based on their documented losses. His other properties, commercial buildings in town, shares in various businesses, were similarly liquidated. Clara received enough money to rebuild her bakery properly and still have savings left over. It wasn't enough to cover everything she'd lost. You couldn't put a price on family heirlooms or the sense of security that came from having a home. But it was a start, a real start. Cole got his ranch debts forgiven entirely and received enough additional funds to repair his property, restock his herd, and hire hands to help with the work. For the first time in 3 years, the Maddox Ranch had a real chance of being profitable again. But Cole came to Clara the day after the restitution was finalized with a different proposal entirely. They were standing in the empty lot where her bakery had been, watching workers clear away the last of the debris. The ground was scorched and bare, but Clara could already picture what would rise here. Something better than before, something built to last. "Marry me," Cole said without preamble. Clara turned to stare at him, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "Marry me. I know we already did it at Anne's house with Daniel's officiating, but I mean really marry me, properly, with a ceremony and witnesses and a celebration that the whole town can see. Cole, we're already married. We signed the papers. We said the vows, in secret, hiding, like we were ashamed." Cole took her hands. "I want to marry you in front of everyone. I want to stand up in front of this town that doubted you, that mocked you, that tried to break you, and tell them all that you're mine and I'm yours and we're not hiding anymore." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. They'd gotten married quickly and quietly 2 weeks into the trial, partly for practical reasons so they couldn't be forced to testify against each other, and partly because waiting felt impossible. But they hadn't told anyone beyond Anne and Daniels. It felt safer that way, less exposed. But Cole was right. They weren't hiding anymore. They didn't have to. "Yes," Clara said. "Let's do it. Let's have a real wedding." Cole's face lit up with a smile so bright it made Clara's heart ache. He pulled her into his arms, lifted her off her feet, and spun her around right there in the ruins of her old life. And Clara laughed, really laughed, for the first time since the fire. They planned the wedding for 3 weeks later, giving people time to prepare, but not so long that Clara could overthink it and panic. Anne helped with the organizing, thrilled to have something joyful to focus on after months of tension and fear. "We'll have it at my house," Anne declared. "The yard's big enough and we can set up tables outside. It'll be perfect." "Anne, you don't have to." "I want to. You two have given this town something to believe in again. The least I can do is host your wedding." Invitations went out to the ranchers who'd stood with them, to the townspeople who'd testified, to anyone who'd shown kindness during the dark months. Clara didn't invite Iris Calloway or her circle. Some wounds were too fresh. But she was surprised when Iris showed up at the bakery lot one afternoon, hat in hand. "I know I'm not invited," Iris said without preamble, "and I don't blame you, but I wanted to tell you something before the wedding." Clara waited, arms crossed, not making this easy. "I was wrong about you," Iris continued. "Wrong about Cole. Wrong about what you two had. Wrong about everything. I spent years making your life harder because I couldn't stand the idea that you might have something I didn't. And I'm sorry, truly sorry." It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't erase years of cruelty and judgment, but it was honest, and Clara could see the cost it took for Iris to say it. "Thank you," Clara said carefully. "I appreciate you saying that. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that watching you fight Hale changed something in me, made me realize what real courage looks like." Iris smiled sadly. "You're a better woman than I'll ever be, Clara Boone. Or Clara Maddox, I suppose. I'm just a woman who got tired of being pushed around." "No. You're a woman who looked at an impossible situation and decided to fight anyway. That's extraordinary." Iris turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I hope you and Cole have a beautiful life together. You've earned it." She left before Clara could respond, and Clara stood alone in the lot, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. She didn't fully forgive Iris. That would take time, if it ever happened at all. But she appreciated the acknowledgement. Sometimes that was enough. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Clara woke early at Anne's house, where she'd spent the night, her stomach fluttering with nerves. It felt absurd to be nervous about marrying someone she was already married to, but this was different. This was public. This was standing up in front of everyone and claiming her happiness without apology. Anne helped her dress in a simple cream-colored gown they'd bought together at the general store. It wasn't fancy. Clara couldn't afford fancy and wouldn't have wanted it anyway. But it fit well and made her feel pretty, special, like a bride should feel. "You look beautiful," Anne said, adjusting Clara's hair. Clara looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. This wasn't the invisible baker who'd shuffled through life trying not to be noticed. This was someone else entirely, someone stronger, braver, more certain of her own worth. "I never thought I'd have this," Clara admitted quietly. "What, a wedding?" "Any of it. Love, respect, a partner who sees me as an equal."
"I spent so many years convinced I wasn't worthy of it." Anne squeezed her shoulder. "Well, you were wrong. And now you get to spend the rest of your life proving it to yourself every single day." The ceremony was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon, when the worst heat had passed, but there was still plenty of daylight left. Clara walked from Anne's house to the gathering spot on Cole's arm, not being given away by anyone, but arriving as herself, making her own choice. The yard was full of people. Clara recognized John Mercer and his family, Mary Sutton with her daughter, now healthy and running around with the other children, the other ranchers who'd stood with them. She saw Tommy in the back, looking nervous but proud. She even saw a few of the townspeople who'd been neutral during the fight, but had clearly chosen a side since. And there, standing under a simple arbor that someone had built and decorated with wildflowers, was Cole. He wore his best suit, which wasn't saying much. It was still clearly a rancher's Sunday clothes, but he'd shaved and combed his hair, and he was looking at Clara like she was the only person in the world, like she was everything. Sheriff Daniels officiated again, but this time there was nothing quick or secretive about it. He talked about love and courage and partnership, about what it meant to stand beside someone through the worst life could throw at you. "Marriage isn't just about the good times," Daniels said. "It's about choosing each other when things get hard, when everything's falling apart, when the easy thing would be to walk away." He looked at Clara and Cole. "You two have already proven you can do that. Now you just have to keep doing it for the next 50 years. The vows were simple. Cole promised to stand beside Clara, to see her truly, to value her as an equal partner in everything they built. Clara promised to be brave, to trust, to let herself be loved without constantly waiting for it to be taken away. When Daniels pronounced them husband and wife, for the second time, but the first time that counted publicly, Cole kissed Clara to cheers and applause, and Clara kissed him back, pouring every ounce of joy and relief and hard-won happiness into it. The celebration lasted until well after dark. People ate and drank and danced in Anne's yard, and Clara moved through it all in a daze of happiness. She accepted congratulations from people who'd once looked right through her. She laughed with Mary Sutton about nothing in particular. She even had a brief, awkward but genuine conversation with Margaret Wells, who apologized stiffly for her role in making Clara's life difficult. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, Cole pulled Clara aside to a quiet corner of the yard. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I knew how to be." "Good. Because I have a wedding present for you." Clara laughed. "We agreed no presents. We've already got everything we need." "This isn't that kind of present." Cole reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I bought the lot next to yours. The old general store that's been sitting empty." Clara took the paper, unfolded it. It was a deed, made out in both their names. "Cole, what? I thought we could expand. Build a real bakery with a commercial kitchen, space for multiple ovens, maybe even a small cafe where people can sit and eat. Make it something bigger than what you had before. Something we build together." Clara stared at the deed, then at Cole, and felt overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was offering. Not just money or property, but a future, a partnership, a chance to build something extraordinary from the ashes of what they'd lost. "Together," she said softly, "always together." They kissed again, slower this time, and Clara felt the last piece of her old self, the part that had been scared and small and convinced she didn't deserve good things, finally let go. Construction on the new bakery began a month later. It wasn't just Clara and Cole working, half the town showed up to help. Ranchers who'd stood with them brought timber and labor. Women who'd testified brought food for the workers. Even people who'd been neutral during the fight pitched in, wanting to be part of rebuilding what Hale had tried to destroy. The building took shape over weeks and months, growing from foundation to walls to roof. It was bigger than Clara's old bakery, more solid, built to last generations. There was a large commercial kitchen in back with space for 3 ovens, a front room that could serve as both shop and cafe, and upstairs, living quarters for Clara and Cole. "You sure you want to live above a bakery?" Clara asked as they walked through the framed-out space. "It'll smell like bread at all hours," Cole grinned. "That's the best part." Clara hired her first apprentice before the building was even finished. Sarah was a young woman, barely 18, who'd been working at the hotel washing dishes and dreamed of something more. She was quiet and nervous, but Clara saw something of herself in the girl, that hunger to prove she could be more than circumstances suggested. "I don't have much education," Sarah admitted, "just what the traveling teacher gave us when she'd passed through." "Can you follow instructions?" "Yes, ma'am." "Can you get up before dawn?" "I already do." "Then you can learn to bake. Everything else is just practice." Sarah became Clara's shadow, watching everything, asking questions, slowly gaining confidence. Clara taught her to judge dough by touch, to read an oven's temperature by sound and smell, to take pride in feeding people well. "You're good at this," Sarah said one morning, watching Clara shape loaves with practiced efficiency. "Good at baking. Good at teaching, explaining things so they make sense without making me feel stupid for not knowing." Clara paused, considered. She'd never thought of herself as a teacher, but maybe that's what she'd become, not just a baker, but someone who could pass on knowledge, who could help others find their own strength the way she'd finally found hers. "My mother taught me," Clara said. "She was patient when I was learning, even when I burned the bread or forgot to add salt. I'm just passing that on." The bakery opened on a bright October morning, 6 months after the wedding. Clara stood outside at dawn, staring at the sign that read Boone and Maddox Bakery in fresh paint. Cole had wanted to call it just Maddox Bakery, but Clara insisted her maiden name stay. It was a link to her mother, to the woman who'd taught her to survive. She wouldn't erase that. The first customers arrived before the sun was fully up. Anne came, of course, and John Mercer with his family. Mary Sutton brought her children. Tommy showed up looking nervous, like he wasn't sure he'd be welcome, but Clara served him personally and refused his money. "You helped save this town," she said. "Your bread's free for life." By mid-morning, there was a line out the door. People came not just for bread, but to see Clara, the woman who'd stood up to Victor Hale and won. Some came out of curiosity, some out of respect, and some out of genuine affection they'd developed watching her fight. Clara worked alongside Sarah, both of them moving in a rhythm that was already becoming familiar. When there was a brief lull, Cole appeared from upstairs with coffee. "How's it going?" he asked. "We're sold out of everything except the dark rye, and that'll be gone within the hour." Cole smiled. "That's a good problem to have." "It is." Clara looked around the shop, at the customers chatting at the small tables, at Sarah confidently handling the till, at the life they'd built from absolutely nothing, and felt contentment settle deep in her bones. Business stayed strong through the fall and into winter. Clara hired 2 more apprentices as demand grew, teaching them the same way she'd taught Sarah. She started taking special orders for weddings and celebrations, and slowly, grudgingly, even the people who doubted her longest came around. Iris Calloway started buying her bread again, though she never apologized directly beyond that one conversation. Margaret and Louise became regular customers, chatting with Clara like they'd never tried to intimidate her into leaving town. It wasn't perfect forgiveness, but Clara learned to accept it. Some people would never fully acknowledge their cruelty, but she didn't need them to. She'd already forgiven herself for ever believing she deserved it. The first real test of the new bakery came in January, when a hard freeze hit the valley. Pipes burst all over town, including the main water line that fed Clara's building. For 3 days, she had no running water for baking or cleaning. The old Clara would have panicked, would have seen it as a sign that she was doomed to fail. But the new Clara just got creative. She hauled water from the town pump in buckets. She adjusted recipes to use less liquid. She asked her apprentices to help, and they worked together until the pipes were fixed. "You didn't even seem worried," Sarah said after everything was back to normal. "I was worried, but I've been through worse than frozen pipes. You learn to handle what's in front of you without borrowing trouble from tomorrow." "Is that something your mother taught you?" Clara thought about it. "No,
That's something I taught myself, the hard way. Spring came, and with it, news that sent ripples through the valley. Victor Hale had died in prison. A guard found him in his cell one morning, dead of what the prison doctor called heart failure. He'd served less than 2 years of his 20-year sentence. Clara heard the news from Sheriff Daniels, who came to tell her personally. "How do you feel about it?" Daniels asked, watching her face carefully. Clara took a moment to examine her emotions honestly. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no grief, no anger. Just a distant sort of acknowledgement that a chapter was finally, truly closed. "I feel free," she said finally, "like I can stop looking over my shoulder waiting for him to come back." "That's fair. I'd feel the same. Is there going to be a funeral?" "His lawyers are handling it. Small service, no public announcement. They don't want protesters showing up." Clara nodded. She wouldn't go even if it was public. Hale had taken enough of her time and energy. She wouldn't give him her grief too. That evening, she told Cole the news. They were sitting on their small porch above the bakery, watching the sun set over the valley. "Good riddance," Cole said flatly. "Cole? What? He tried to kill you, multiple times. I'm not going to pretend to mourn him." "I'm not asking you to mourn, but maybe we can just let it go. He's gone. We won. The fight's over." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "You're more generous than I am." "I'm tired. There's a difference." Clara leaned against him. "I don't want to spend any more energy on Victor Hale. I want to spend it on us, on the bakery, on building the life we almost lost." "Then that's what we'll do." 2 years after Hale's conviction, Thomas Brennan published a full account of everything that had happened in the Three Pines Gazette. He'd spent months researching, interviewing witnesses, verifying facts. The result was a 20-page special edition that laid out the entire story: the intimidation, the resistance, the trial, the victory. The edition sold out within hours. Brennan had to do 3 additional print runs, and copies made their way across the territory and beyond. Suddenly, Clara and Cole were known far outside Three Pines. People wrote letters asking for advice on fighting corrupt landowners. A few even traveled to Three Pines specifically to meet them. Clara found the attention uncomfortable at first. She was just a baker who'd refused to back down. But Cole pointed out that maybe that's exactly what people needed to see, that ordinary people could fight back and win if they were brave enough and stubborn enough. One letter stood out from the others. It came from a young woman in the Eastern Valley named Rebecca, and it was eerily similar to Clara's own story. "There's a man here like Hale," Rebecca wrote. "He's trying to force my father off our land. I read about what you did, and I wondered if you could help, if you could tell me how to fight back." Clara showed the letter to Cole that evening. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think you should help her. Share what we learned. Give her the tools to fight. It could be dangerous. If we get involved, we're not getting directly involved. We're just giving her information. How to document, who to contact, what worked for us and what didn't." Cole squeezed her hand. "You have knowledge that could save her family. Why wouldn't you share it?" Clara thought about herself 3 years ago, desperate and alone, with no idea how to fight someone as powerful as Hale. If someone had reached out to her then, offered guidance and support, how much faster could things have been resolved? How much pain could have been avoided? She wrote back to Rebecca that night, a long, detailed letter explaining everything she'd learned: how to document threats and intimidation, how to find allies, how to build a case that law enforcement couldn't ignore. She sent copies of the templates she'd created, the organizational structures that had worked, even contact information for the territorial marshal. Rebecca wrote back a month later. She'd started documenting everything, had found 3 other families willing to stand with her, and had filed a formal complaint with the county. It wasn't over yet, but it was a start. "Thank you," Rebecca wrote. "You gave me hope when I thought I had none left. You showed me that standing up was possible. Whatever happens, I'll never forget that." Clara kept the letter, and when more started arriving from people all over the territory facing similar situations, she answered every single one. It became a kind of mission, helping others fight the battles she'd already won. On their 2nd anniversary, Cole took Clara to the ridge above his ranch where they'd first talked about fighting back against Hale. They sat on the grass watching the sun set over the valley, and Clara marveled at how different everything looked now.
The valley was healing. The ranchers who'd stood with them were thriving. New families had moved in to buy the land Hale had hoarded, bringing fresh energy and ideas. Three Pines was growing, changing, becoming something better than it had been. "You ever regret it?" Cole asked. "Everything we went through?" Clara thought about the bakery burning, the fear and violence, the night she'd been sure they would lose. Then she thought about where they were now, married, successful, respected, loved. "No," she said, "I don't regret any of it, not even the hard parts. Because without them, I wouldn't be here with you. I wouldn't be who I am now." "You were always strong, Clara. You just didn't know it yet." "Maybe. But I had to prove it to myself. Had to walk through fire, literally, to understand what I was capable of." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned orange and purple and finally dark. Stars emerged one by one, and Clara felt something she'd never felt before: deep, unshakable peace. Not happiness exactly, because happiness was too fleeting. This was knowing you'd lived through the worst and come out whole on the other side. 3 years after the trial, Clara stood in her bakery training her fifth apprentice and heard the bell above the door ring. She looked up to see a young woman, maybe 20, thin, nervous, standing in the doorway. "Can I help you?" Clara asked. The woman hesitated. "Are you Clara Maddox?" "I am." "My name is Rebecca. I wrote to you a while back about the trouble in the Eastern Valley." Clara's face lit up with recognition. "Rebecca, come in, please. I've been following your case. I heard you won." Rebecca smiled, but it was tired. "We won the legal battle. The man who was threatening us is in jail, but now we're trying to rebuild, and it's harder than I thought. I came to ask your advice, and to thank you in person. You saved my family." Clara came around the counter, took Rebecca's hands. "You saved your own family. I just gave you tools you already had the courage to use." "You gave me more than tools. You gave me hope. You showed me what was possible." They talked for over an hour, Clara sharing the lessons she'd learned about rebuilding after trauma, about how communities heal, about the long, slow process of moving forward. Rebecca listened intently, taking notes, asking questions. When Rebecca finally left, Clara felt a profound sense of purpose. The fight against Hale had nearly destroyed her, but it had also taught her things worth knowing, things worth sharing, and now she could use that hard-won knowledge to help others. It became a pattern. People would show up at the bakery, sometimes alone, sometimes in small groups, asking for guidance. Clara helped them all, never charging, never seeking recognition, just passing on what she'd learned in the hope that fewer people would have to learn it the hard way. 5 years after Hale's conviction, the territorial governor came to Three Pines to dedicate a new community center, a building funded by the last of the seized assets from Hale's estate. It stood on the site of the old livery stable, a symbol of how destruction could become creation. The governor gave a speech about justice and perseverance, then turned to Clara. "Mrs. Maddox has shown us all what one person can do when they refuse to accept injustice. I'd like her to say a few words." Clara stood reluctantly, unused to public speaking, uncomfortable with being singled out. But she walked to the podium and looked out at the crowd of familiar faces. "I'm not good at speeches," she started, and got a laugh. "But I'll say this. 5 years ago, this town was being controlled by fear. We let one man tell us who we could be, what we could do, what we were worth, and it took losing everything to realize that he was wrong." She paused, gathered her thoughts. "We were worth more than he said. We were stronger than he believed. And together, we were unstoppable. But here's the thing most people don't talk about. Winning didn't fix everything. We still had to rebuild. We still had to learn to trust each other again. We still had to do the hard work of becoming a real community instead of just a collection of scared individuals." Clara looked at Cole standing in the front row, then at Anne beside him, then at all the others who'd fought alongside them. "This center represents that work. It's not just a building. It's a promise that we'll stand together, that we'll help each other, that we'll never let fear control us again." She smiled. "And if Victor Hale taught us anything, it's that ordinary people fighting together are stronger than any tyrant standing alone." The crowd applauded, and Clara stepped down feeling self-conscious but satisfied. She'd said what needed saying. Nothing fancy, nothing dramatic, just the truth. The celebration lasted until evening. Children ran through the new center's halls while adults caught up, made plans,
built on the foundation of community that had been forged in crisis.
Clara slipped away from the crowd at sunset and walked to the cemetery on the hill.
Her mother was buried there, under a simple stone Clara had paid for with her first profits from the new bakery. She sat on the grass beside the grave and told her mother everything, about Cole, about the fight, about the life she'd built from ashes. "I wish you could see this," Clara said quietly. "Wish you could see that everything you taught me about survival, it was enough. It was always enough.
I just had to learn how to use it. You taught me to be strong even when I didn't feel strong. To keep going even when everything hurt. And those lessons saved my life, Mama. They saved everything." She felt Cole before she heard him, his presence solid and familiar. He sat beside her, didn't speak, just waited while Clara finished her conversation with the dead. "She'd be proud of you," Cole said finally. "I hope so. She didn't get to see me happy. She died when I was still just surviving, still just getting through each day. But she gave you the tools to get here. That counts for something." Clara leaned against him. "Yeah, it does." They sat there until full dark, then walked back to town hand in hand. The bakery was closed for the celebration, but Clara could see it from here, solid, permanent, thriving. A life built not on fear or invisibility, but on courage and love and the hard-won knowledge that she deserved both. 10 years after that first morning when Cole stumbled through her door, Clara stood in the same spot where her old bakery had been and marveled at everything that had changed. The building was bigger, more prosperous. She had 6 apprentices now, 3 of whom had already moved on to open their own bakeries in other towns. Sarah had become her partner, managing the day-to-day operations while Clara focused on training and community work. The bakery was more than just a business. It had become a gathering place, a symbol of resistance and resilience. People came not just for bread but for hope, for proof that fighting back was possible. Cole's ranch was thriving too. They'd bought the neighboring property, part of Hale's old holdings, and expanded. They ran 200 head of cattle now, employed 4 hands, and were considered one of the most successful operations in the valley. But more than any material success, Clara and Cole had built a partnership that worked. They fought sometimes, both were too stubborn not to, but they always came back to the fundamental truth that they were on the same side, that they'd chosen each other through the worst life could throw at them and would keep choosing each other through whatever came next. Clara turned 49 that spring. It wasn't a milestone birthday, nothing special, but Cole threw her a party anyway. Half the town showed up, bearing gifts and well wishes. Clara stood in her bakery, surrounded by friends and neighbors and apprentices, and felt overwhelmed by how full her life had become. "Speech!" someone called out, and others took up the chant. Clara laughed, embarrassed. "I already gave one speech this year. That's my limit." "Come on, Clara, just a few words." She sighed but stood. "All right, just a few." She looked around the room at all these people who'd become her family. 29 years ago, I inherited a bakery and a legacy of survival from my mother. For most of those years, I thought that was all I'd ever have. A business, a routine, a life that was fine, but not full. She found Cole's eyes across the room. Then a bleeding stranger knocked on my door one morning and everything changed. Not all at once, not easily, but completely. Clara's voice caught. He saw me when I'd spent decades being invisible. He stood beside me when standing was dangerous. He loved me when I didn't think I deserved love. And together, we built something I never dared to dream about. She gestured around the bakery. This isn't just a shop. It's proof that second chances exist. That you're never too old to start over. That ordinary people can do extraordinary things if they're brave enough to try. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't care. I'm 49 years old. I spent 43 of those years invisible. But these last 6? She smiled through the tears. These have been worth waiting for. Thank you all for being part of them. The room erupted in applause, and Cole made his way through the crowd to pull her into his arms. Clara held on to him, this man who'd changed everything, and felt grateful for every hard moment that had led her here. 15 years after the trial, Clara received a letter that made her cry. It was from a woman in the territorial capital who'd been following the stories of resistance Clara had helped inspire. Because of you and others like you who've stood up to corruption, the territory has passed new laws protecting property rights and punishing intimidation, the woman wrote. Your fight didn't just save 3 Pines, it changed the entire territory. You've made it safer for all of us.
Clara showed the letter to Cole that evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset.
You changed the world, Cole said quietly. We changed a small part of it. That's all anyone can do. It's enough. It's more than enough. Clara thought about that, about how one morning, one choice to help a stranger had spiraled into all of this. She thought about the people she'd helped, the laws that had changed, the community that had healed. And she thought about herself, the transformation from invisible to essential, from victim to victor, from alone to beloved. Yeah, she said softly. It is enough. 20 years after Cole first knocked on her door, Clara stood at the edge of 63 and looked back at the journey with wonder. The bakery was an institution now, run mostly by Sarah and the newest generation of apprentices. Cole had started slowing down too, letting their hired hands take on more of the ranch work. They spent more time together than ever, taking walks through the valley, visiting friends, enjoying the life they'd fought so hard to build. One morning in late summer, Clara woke before dawn out of habit, even though she didn't bake regularly anymore. She slipped out of bed without waking Cole and went downstairs to the bakery kitchen. Sarah and 2 apprentices were already at work, moving through the familiar rhythms Clara had taught them. She watched for a while, then quietly let herself out the back door. She walked through town as the sun rose, past the community center, past Anne's house, where the old widow still lived, past the spot where the livery stable had burned. She ended up at the cemetery, standing in front of her mother's grave. I made it, Mama, Clara said quietly. Made it through everything. Built a life worth living. Found love worth fighting for. She smiled. You'd like Cole. He's stubborn like you were. And he sees me the way you always said someone would, if I just gave them the chance. The sun was fully up now, warm on her face. Clara closed her eyes and felt the peace of a life fully lived settle into her bones. She'd been invisible for so long, but then she'd chosen to be seen, and that choice had changed everything, not just for her, but for an entire valley, an entire territory, for people she'd never meet who would benefit from the laws her fight had inspired. Clara opened her eyes and looked out over 3 Pines. The town was waking up, smoke rising from chimneys, people starting their days. It was ordinary and beautiful, and hers in a way it had never been when she was young. She walked back to the bakery, climbed the stairs, and found Cole awake and looking for her. Where'd you go? He asked. Saying good morning to Mama and saying thank you. For what? Clara took his weathered, work-worn hands in hers. For everything. For teaching me to survive so I could learn to thrive. For bringing you to my door. For every hard moment that led us here. Cole pulled her close. No regrets? Not a single one. They stood there in the morning light, 2 people who'd found each other in the darkness and built something luminous together. Outside, 3 Pines continued its morning routine, a community that had been broken and remade, stronger for the breaking. And in her bakery, Clara's apprentices mixed dough and fired ovens and carried on the legacy she'd created. Not just of bread, but of resistance, of courage, of the radical act of standing up when standing up was dangerous. Clara Maddox, once Clara Boone, once invisible, now unforgettable, held her husband and felt complete. She'd lived through fire and come out tempered, not destroyed. She'd fought impossible battles and won the ones that mattered most, and she would never, ever be invisible again. That was enough. That was everything.